Bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Welcome. Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. That's right. Today is Tuesday, January 5th. 5 days into the new year, 360 days left. We are live from downtown Burbank, California. Wet and rainy Burbank, California. It's going to rain for the next week here, and we need it. I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black. For KJCR and the Game Changer Network, KGRA and the TalkNetwork.com, I'm your oh so humble host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? I'd like to welcome all the new listeners. Talk Radio, TalkNet, Talk Network. Sorry about that. I'm adjusting things here in the studio. Setting my coffee down. Getting ready because there's some breaking news out of North Korea, and I'm reading that too as well. And we'll get to that in just a second. I'm starting to digest it. It has just happened. Okay. Yeah, got to wipe my brow. It's going down over in North Korea. Tonight, we have very special guest Peter Levenda. He will be joining us, and we're going to be talking about world events, the Middle East, and who is really running the world today. Tomorrow night, Robert Sullivan IV is going to be here. We're going to be discussing cinema symbolism in Hollywood. The call-in number is 323-825-5045. You can also Skype in Fade to Black 14. This week on Coast to Coast, Friday, my guest will be Sean Stone. And on Saturday, over on Coast, my guest will be William Henry. So got a full week of the church stir coming at you. No rest for the wicked. All right, let's go. Let's get this show cracking. We've got a lot to do tonight. I've got a little rant set up too as well. And again, for all of the new listeners over at TalkNetwork.com, this is a long-form conversation show. This is late-night talk radio at its finest. This is what it's all about. So just kick back, get comfortable, get your beverage of choice. I always say this, get your smoke of choice. Pull up the blankie, get ready, and turn things up a little bit. You don't want to wake up the folks in the next room. You know, you want this to be secret. My studio is dark. It's a bunker. I have no windows. And you need to get that image plugged in your mind because you're in the dark. I'm in the dark. And here we are. Just get comfortable. Let's do this. It's going to be a great show tonight. It's going to be an amazing conversation. It's going to be absolutely exactly what you expect for a long-form conversation, late-night, dark talk radio. All right? Let's do this. I'm so excited about having Peter Levenda back with us. He's one of the best. I'll get to all of that in just a second. This show is supported by our sponsors. So go to Life Change Tea. Change your life. Do what I do. Change your life. Go to Life Change Tea. JimmyChurchRadio.com. Click, go, and do it. Studio Dome, surround sound speakers, Bluetooth speakers. There's no better way to listen to Fade to Black than with a Studio Dome surround sound system. Go and check it out. Their entire product line. They're huge supporters of this show. We are big supporters of them, Studio Dome. And we have 3 conferences that are coming up. And I think we've got everything updated at jimmychurchradio.com, but we've got 3 conferences, 2 in February. Alien Snowfest, February 5th through the 7th. Get your tickets now. Go over to Jimmy Church Radio. You just click on the banner. It's right there. Also, the 14th Annual Conscious Life Expo, February 19th through the 22nd at the LAX Hilton. We'll be broadcasting live from the Conscious Life Expo. At Alien Snowfest, we'll be, we're going to do a presentation, but we're also going to host the luncheon on Saturday. Both conventions are great. One is in Big Bear, one is here in Los Angeles. All of the Fadernauts come out. It's an opportunity for me to just hang out with everybody, and you get to meet Rita. Always remember that. And then, of course, we have Contact in the Desert, which is coming up. And I think we've got the banners up now. If we don't, we will by tomorrow. But you can go to contactinthedesert.com. The 2016 speaker list is now up and active, and you can go and check that out. With that, let's get the show cracking. I'm going to vent a little bit tonight. So before I get to that, let's get a couple of things out of the way. One, I want to say happy birthday to Marilyn Manson, 47 years old. That's right. Vinnie Jones, you know Vinnie from Snatch, he's 51. And Clancy Brown today is 57. He played Zim in Starship Troopers. Also, he played Kurgan in Highlander. I love Clancy Brown. He is great. And you can follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can email throughout the show, Jimmy at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Very simple. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. We use TweetDeck here in the studio. So off to my left, for all of you new listeners right now, you've got to kind of grasp what we do here. This is a real-time interactive show. Other shows say that, well, whatever, forget about all that. But here it is truly interactive. So TweetDeck is live to my left. We burn through 2, 3, 4, 5,000 tweets a night per show. So hashtag F2B is the sandbox. Come, hang out, follow, participate. Hashtag F2BQ is questions for myself or the guest in real time. And it is constantly clicking and spinning to my left, and I do my best to follow it. So hang out with us. It's great. Now, of course, we take calls throughout the show, and that part of it is cool too as well. But it allows you to hang out and converse with the audience. Okay, it's great. It's real too. It's real, and everybody over. We have 2 or 3 chat rooms that go on at the same time. And last night for Wilcock, I noticed what was going on over in the Spreaker chat room. And 1,500 comments last night. That's insane. And that's how big the audience is, and that's how cool the audience is. They just hang out and talk to each other. It is awesome. So do that at JChurch Radio. Right now, follow us on Twitter. Jack Dorsey, I just tweeted out to Jack. Jack Dorsey made this weird announcement. He's the CEO of Twitter. And I've known Jack for a few years, about five, since Twitter started. When was that, 2010, 2011, 2010? And I had told him back then I didn't understand Twitter. I didn't understand the concept. And I literally said, 140 characters, dude, doesn't make any sense. Can't you do 300? I could get a thought out with 300. I can't get a thought out with 140 characters. And apparently they set up Twitter to do to conform with SMS texting, which the character limit there was 160. So that was the intention. But now it's a brave new world. So it looks like Twitter might actually expand. Now they've got a little twist on it. I think they're going to stay at 140, but they're going to have a little button there to expand the tweet. But the actual quick thought conversation idea of 140 characters, I think that's going to stay. But if they do expand it, I think it's a great idea. So I just tweeted to Jack. I said, dude, I told you years ago 300. And I did. But and then I said, you need to come on the show. And I'm going to see if we can get Jack on and to talk about that. On this day in history, Sonny Bono in 1998 was killed skiing while on vacation with his family in South Lake Tahoe, California. And it was a weird skiing accident. Sonny Bono. Fader fact. This is a Fader fact. And for all of you new listeners, check this out. I do this every show. Come up with something really strange. And check this out. This hit me like a ton of bricks today. Fader fact. White people. Start off a fact with white people. White people consume 60 to 80% of all rap music in the United States. That's vetted. That is a fact. Wow. Pretty crazy. Breaking news. There are reports now, and it's all across the news wires, which is also about what we are going to be talking about tonight, which is mass media. There are reports going around right now of a 5.1 magnitude artificial earthquake near a North Korean nuclear testing site. The South Korean government believes it is man-made. High-level meetings are ensuing. An announcement is expected within the hour. China Earthquake Network's Center in Beijing is describing the event as a suspected explosion. Interesting. Now, after last night's show, I went and I was talking to Rita today. I was up all night. I couldn't sleep. And I just had thoughts going through my brain, and I couldn't stop it. And I'm not a ufologist. I'm not a researcher. I'm not an author. I'm a show host. It's what I do. But the one thing that I get to do almost every single night of the week is I interview some of the best researchers and authors on the planet. It's my job. It's my job to bring this information to you. It is your job to take that information and digest it. Agree or disagree, you learn. You find out something. The one thing that I've figured out over the years is that somehow, and I don't know why yet, that there is one big, huge lie, a conspiracy that overlaps just about everything that we know, everything that we've been taught, told in news programming, in textbooks. Just imagine that if one day some talking head on CNN appeared and said something like, "We don't know where we came from. We just appeared one day. There are gaps in our history that can't be explained. And today, all schools and universities are getting new books." Imagine that kind of announcement. But it'll never happen. Right? It's because there is a lie. Why do I say this? Today, I find myself not believing anything. I don't know if we went to the moon. I don't know about 9/11. I don't know about ISIS. I don't know about MH370. I don't know who built the pyramids or why. John F. Kennedy, Vietnam, Ebola, Mars, the moon, the Federal Reserve, every politician's flapping jaw, E.T., Russia, China, every news program, everything is a lie. It was a bad habit that was formed thousands of years ago. Maybe it was something like an impending volcano eruption, bad crops, spoiling food, disease, drought, whatever, doesn't matter. But the masses got lied to. They got lied to. Blame it on the gods. Blame it on whatever. But just come up with a good story, lie, and get people off of the truth and keep them working. Keep them paying taxes. Keep them supporting the ruling elite. Just lie. Today, the lie is the normal. The truth isn't. Ever. Any mass media outlet that says, we give you the truth, is lying. Everything today supports big farm, pharmaceutical industry, big oil, petrochemicals, the military, the government, food, entertainment. The lie supports all of that. But today, the good news, the times are a-changing, my friend. For the first time in our history, we truly have real information that is not controlled by the big lie. We are waking up. When we hear one thing from the media today, and then the exact opposite from another source, we can now say, wait, stop, pump the brakes. Somebody is not being honest here. And we have the ability to search, to investigate, and to draw our own conclusions. We don't have to depend on one opinion, one talking head, one voice yelling at us, one supposed fact from one news source. Tonight, we have Peter Levenda. He is one of the true great researchers and authors of our generation. Over the years, he's been able to paint a brilliant picture for us with words. A picture that everything we know about our history is wrong. It's twisted. It's so out of whack that we don't know. Our heads are spinning on a swivel, back and forth. And although you may or may not agree with everything that Peter says, you are going to leave the show tonight enlightened and glad that you were here and that you spent this time with me on Fade to Black. That's what this show is about. So get comfortable. It's going to be great. Let's get to all the news you know nothing about. The world's attention is focused on Saudi Arabia's latest flare-up with Iran. Many Saudis right now are concerned about the economic bomb that's about to ignite at home. The government is slashing a plethora of perks for its citizens. I love that word, plethora. Now, this is exactly what I'm talking about. The big lie. So that's the headline. The cash crunch is so dire that the Saudi government just hiked the price of gasoline by 50%. 50%. Remember that. Saudis right now are lining up at gas stations today to fill up before the higher gas prices are kicking in. They're freaking out. That's the headline. Now, check this. Here are some of the perks that Saudi citizens receive. 50% gas hike. Are you ready? They get subsidized gas. This morning, it was 16 cents a liter. Tomorrow, it's going to be 24 cents. And they are losing their mind. Big economic bomb. Driving SUVs, they get 2 miles to the gallon. They don't care. It breaks down, they park it on the side of the road and go get another car. Saudi citizens get free health care, free schools, subsidized water and electricity, no income tax, public pensions. Nearly 90% of all Saudi citizens are employed by the government. the private sector doesn't pay enough. They work for the government. Free jobs. The higher paying government jobs are so much higher than private sector that they don't want, they would rather work for the government. Unemployment benefits across. You know, there is no unemployment there after the Arab Spring. They made sure that they had unemployment benefits for the people that want to quit their cush government jobs. They have a development fund that provides interest-free loans to Saudi citizens, interest-free loans to Saudi citizens to buy homes, to start businesses. And now they're upset about $36 a barrel gas. It's their own fault. And I don't care. We're finally seeing under $2 a gallon gas here in the United States. $1.50. Keep pumping the oil, Saudi. We're cool with that. Just irritates me. And that's what the mass media will report on. They're upset about 24 cents a liter gas in a country that they're tripping over money. There's so much money there, they don't know what to do. Truly don't know what to do with it. Moving on. Man, I'm just irate. The world's biggest blue sapphire, weighing in at, this is amazing, 1,404 carats, has been found in a mine in Sri Lanka. Gemologists in Colombo say that the gem is worth around $100 million. It could sell for up to $175 million. I posted pictures of this over on our Facebook page, and I didn't know somebody else did, but the picture is there. And you ought to see this thing sitting in this photograph in the hands. It's huge. Star sapphires get their name because of the six-pointed star-shaped reflection that appears on their surface when it's polished. Go check this picture out. It's amazing. The gem was discovered last August in a town in southern Sri Lanka known as the City of Gems. A November accident has cost a U.S. submarine commander his job and taxpayers at least $1 million. Announcement today came out of the Navy. The USS Georgia, an Ohio-class guided missile submarine, struck a channel buoy and grounded as it was returning to port in Kings Bay, Georgia, on November 25th. Captain Dave Adams of the Georgia was relieved of command yesterday by Rear Admiral Randy Kreitz, commander of the Submarine Group 10 at the Naval Submarine Base at Kings Bay. Now, he apologized, and this is what's whack about it. It's his home base. He pulls in. He says it was dark outside. It was early. He was in the early morning darkness. Lost control of the sub. It's his job. Hit a buoy. And now nobody was hurt, nothing like that. But this is the thing. When you are in command of a nuclear sub or ship or anything like that, any little thing, anything at all, that's it. That's it. You're done. You're toast. You will never command a Navy sub again. Now, one has to ask, with all of the sensitive electronic equipment on a submarine, a 560-foot nuclear sub with ballistic missiles, cannot avoid a buoy at the entrance of its base? Doesn't make sense, does it? $1 million worth of damage. Apparently, the hull wasn't breached. Nobody was injured. He's out of a gig. He's on desk duty. Vulnerabilities in Comcast's Xfinity home security system could make it possible for burglars to break into someone's home without triggering the alert that's meant to notify anybody when their home is broken into. Yes, researchers at the cybersecurity company Rapid7 exploited a security hole in the Xfinity home security system, which includes doors, windows, motion sensors that enables an outsider to make it seem as if a window or door is closed when in fact it's open. Now, all the thief has to do is spend $100 and grab a radio jammer, and you can block the signal that's normally emitted from an open door or open window, whatever. Then when the jam signal is released, it takes anywhere, check this, anywhere from just a few minutes to 3 hours to reset the connection. Insert joke here. I read stuff like that. I vet it. I check it out, and it throws me into shock. And the question is, first off, how many people have the system? Right? That's the first thing. What are they paying? What are they paying per month? And they had no idea. And when Cybersecurity Rabbit 7, when that company releases this, how many guys go, hey, check this. Let's go buy a radio jammer. Let's check the system out. And then you roll around the neighborhood, and this is how my polluted mind works. This is how it works. You roll around, and you look for the Comcast sign plugged in somebody's front yard. Alert. You look for the Comcast sticker in the window. Armed security, beware. Comcast. And no, I'm not aware. I'm pulling in the driveway. Think about that for a second. It's absolutely bizarre. Welcome, everybody. This is Fade to Black. Tonight, Peter Levenda is with us. Peter's history. After the show tonight, this is what I want you to do. And some of my faithful out there have done this, but I'm going to ask that you do this. Tonight after the show, what you want to do, write this down. Write Peter Levenda Secret Space Program. Okay? Peter Levenda Secret Space Program. And then do a Google search, click on video, and you're going to see his presentation that he did in Amsterdam a few years back. Watch that presentation. That right there, that presentation by Peter Levenda is the sole reason to have the internet. Watch that video, and you can be done with it. You can just forget about the internet for the rest of your life. That's how great that presentation is. That presentation will freak you out. And that's who we have on the show tonight, Peter Levenda. He is absolutely, hands down, the best. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Hashtag F2B is the sandbox. Hashtag F2BQ are questions. Email is jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Make it good. Get it past the producers. Maybe I'll read it on the air. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses on KGRA, The Planet, and TalkNetwork.com. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio. What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I gotta tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil 3-letter. So, seriously, Give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is TalkNetwork.com.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, The Planet.
Hi, this is Chase Kletsky with Fate Magazine Radio, and you're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station, where the Fade or Nots rock.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
Welcome back to Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. All right, before we get things cracking tonight, Peter is here. He's in the batter's box. He's swinging. But our fearless leader, Race Hobbs, who's probably listening to me right now from his hospital bed, heavily medicated and feeling pretty good, is in the hospital tonight. He's going to be there for a little bit. And I just want to squash all the rumors out there. He's just fine. I think he's faking it. But he wants a break. So he went to the ER yesterday. He kept us updated today, and I was talking to him right before the show via text, by the way. And I could tell how he was slurring his text that he's going to be okay. All right, there was no operation. There was nothing. His issues are personal, but I know he's in a lot of pain. Okay, but Race, we love you, brother. Get better. Just enjoy the drugs, okay? And that's what you do. Just kick back and listen to the show tonight. Rumors have been around today that he's actually got a laptop, smuggled it in to his hospital room, and I'm sure he's listening to us right now. Race, get better, my brother. And our thoughts are with you. With that, our guest tonight is Peter Levenda. Tomorrow night, Robert Sullivan IV is going to be here. We'll be discussing cinema symbolism in Hollywood, Freemasons, and all of that good stuff. That is that's the other half that is running the world. We'll be doing that tomorrow night with Robert Sullivan IV. But tonight, it's Peter Levenda. Peter has researched the material for his books over the course of 25 years. He's visited more than 40 countries, been arrested in most of them, and he has gained access to temples, prisons, the wrong side of prisons, military installations, and government documents. He is the author of Sinister Forces 1, 2, and 3, The Hitler Legacy, Rat Line, and Tantric Temples. You can view all of his published work as trilogies. The 3 volumes of Sinister Forces make up the American trilogy. The 3 volumes of Unholy Alliance, Ratline, and the Hitler Legacy make up the Nazi trilogy. The Secret Temple, the Angel and the Sorcerer, and the Dark Lord make up the Western Esoteric trilogy. Stairway to Heaven, Tantric Temples, and the upcoming The Tantric Alchemist will make up the Initiatory trilogy. He has appeared in the TNT documentary Faces of Evil, as an expert on Nazi history with a special regard to the occult and esoteric practices. He has also appeared on History Channel's special Nazi Prophecies. He has been on the show many times. He's been on Coast to Coast with me, and I want to welcome back our good friend, Peter Levenda. Peter, good evening, sir.
Good evening to you. Thank you very much.
Peter, and I was welcome back to the program. I was so tempted, and I told you this earlier this week. I wanted to run the picture of you and I stuffing our faces at lunch. I still think it is one of the classic pictures. But I held back. I just held back. I don't know why I did, but I don't know if it was more embarrassing for you or me. But it was a moment in time, and I cherish it. It was a great conversation. You know, I'm going to tell everybody Rita's probably going to post that picture right now on Twitter. And the funny thing about that, Peter and I, we were at Contact in the Desert, and we were in the cafeteria, which was packed with probably 200-300 people. And I'm sitting there eating, and one person after another came up to Peter. Peter, you're the best. I can't believe you're here. I can't believe it. Can I ask you a question? It was like there was a line at our table. Nobody saw me. So I got to eat. Peter didn't. And there you go.
Story.
but that's the story behind the photograph. Yeah, exactly.
Not eating, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt so bad for you because you were so polite and you spoke to everybody and your food got cold. But there you go. Peter, crazy times we live in, and I had said in the intro, and I really mean this, you've actually seen the wrong side of prison doors. And your research has taken you to some dark places out there, and you've gotten yourself into some trouble. And this, although the story is kind of famous now, I chased you down, and I found out that you were still alive, and the rumors needed to be stopped. That Peter has a pulse, he's okay, he's back, and he's here. But it has certainly taken you to some crazy places, and why do you do it? I mean, why do you put yourself in jeopardy? I know you do it for us, and that's the answer, but seriously, why do you go there? And I know that you must sleep with one eye open.
Well, I got involved in this at a very early age, and I sort of got the bug, to go out and do the weird stuff and to do the things that nobody else would do, or maybe it was just feeling, young and invulnerable or whatever it was. But the idea is that, this is the only way you find out stuff. I started doing the research before there was an internet, before there was all these online resources where you could do a lot of research on your own from your mother's basement or something. I didn't have that luxury. I had to go out and find it myself. And, it started with archives and it started with libraries. And once I exhausted, those reserves in the United States, in New York and D.C. and places like that, well, you have to go overseas. And then I would hear stories about weird groups or weird, societies or, Nazi estates or something. And, I had to go and find out for myself. I had to go and see it. I had to go and, see if it was really true. Otherwise, I was living in this kind of, this dream world, dissociated from reality, like many of us, normally are. And I just wanted to go and take a look and say, okay, I was there. I saw it. These people really exist. They really do believe this weird stuff that they claim they believe. I mean, it's all real and it's all there. I just didn't really think it through in those days. I got to the point where I could go there and check it out. I really didn't think about the exit strategies too well. Getting out of these places in one piece and getting back to the States and and lying low and keeping your head down. That part sort of escaped me, I guess, but. Initially, that's what I had to do. I had to go and see for myself. I had to really know if the world was as really screwed up as it seemed to be, and if the people in charge of that screwing up, really believed in what they were doing. Nobody really believes they're evil. Everybody thinks they're doing everything for the right reasons, even if you're a Nazi or a Klansman or whatever it is. I had to go and check it out for myself and talk to these people and, and get the vibe and see if these people really, do mean what they say.
Are you suggesting that at one point you weren't the tinfoil hat guy? You were the guy looking at the tinfoil hat conspiracy, other bizarro world, right? And
Yep.
And then you stepped into it. At one point, did did your head spin around and you just said to yourself, "This stuff is happening. This is real"?
Well, it was kind of gradual. It built up over time. You're right. I didn't want to be a tinfoil hat guy. I mean, my heroes were, Woodward and Bernstein. my heroes were the investigative journalists, which we don't really have much anymore.
Right.
But those were my heroes. People like Jim Hogan, for instance, or Dick Russell. These were the guys who went out and did the investigations and came up with this stuff, talked to people, got copies of documents they weren't supposed to have, talked to people they shouldn't have even known existed. These were my heroes. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to go out and be those guys. But as I was doing that, other things would creep into the conversations. Other elements would creep in. Esoteric stuff, arcane stuff, the weird religions that surround, the Kennedy assassination. We've talked about that before. That kind of stuff was always there. And I had a personal contact with this material. So I had a place to put it. I had a context that these other guys maybe didn't have. So I was able to go there and start to put these two and two together, and pretty soon I was making my own tinfoil hats. That's basically is what happened. I mean, I kind of hold some of it at arm's length because some of the speculation is too much, even for me. I need a little bit of documentation. I need a little bit of something, some kind of evidence. But there is a terrific element out there that is so bizarre and so unreal that it makes no sense, and most people ignore it, like they ignore the UFO phenomenon, for instance, right? I mean, it's a career ender. If you're a scientist and you start talking about little green men, it's over for you. Your grants dry up, people lock their doors, and that's the end of it. If you start talking about the arcane, the esoteric, as a historian, or as a journalist or an investigator, the same thing happens. You're dealing in la-la land. This stuff is not real. It's not true. And I began to see that it was true, that the stuff does exist. These experiences are real, and we have to find a place to put them. We have to find a context for it. And that's kind of motivated me for, these many years.
With I had mentioned to everybody leading up to bringing you on the show is your presentation that you did in Amsterdam. As you know, I'm a huge fan of that 90 minutes. It's 90 minutes of some of the best stuff that you can possibly find anywhere on the internet if you're doing research or if you just want to be fascinated with the subject. But you, in that presentation, when somebody comes up to me and they say, well, what do UFOs have to do with conspiracy? You call yourself the king of conspiracy. What does that have to do with JFK? What does that have to do with what's going on with the New World? It doesn't. They don't coexist. And your presentation, not only do you connect the earliest events in ufology, going back to Maury Island and Kenneth Arnold and what happened up in Seattle and Tacoma, all the way through secret societies to the secret space program to Werner von Braun to the Kennedy assassination and beyond to today's events that are happening today in the Middle East. They're all connected, and it's one big conspiracy. When somebody hears your presentation or sees that video for the first time, they come up to you and they're astounded because you make sense of it all. And how many lives have you changed like that? If you think about the millions of views that you've had on the internet and the people that see your live presentation, they come up and they go, Peter, this can't be true. Do you find yourself, when you talk about this, saying the exact same thing? It's nearly impossible that all of this can be connected, and it truly is.
Well, it is, it seems on the face of it to be impossible. And yet every time you turn over a rock in this stuff, you come up with the same names, the same groups, the same people. I mean, it's so specific that you can't escape it. And the only reason we have escaped it so far, the only reason it hasn't made the pages of mainstream history books is because no one can figure out what it means. And since they can't figure out what it means, they kind of ignore it. We don't know how to describe it, so let's ignore it. Maybe it'll go away. I mean, that's how they treat, ufology, right? We don't know how to explain it. These experiences happen. Jacques Vallée writes about it, John Keel. They have this approach to it, and the only approach you can take sometimes is their approach, which is this is a consciousness thing. It's some kind of weird experiment. We can't quite describe it. But the same thing is what I write about. I mean, it connects back to the assassinations for sure. I mean, Jim Garrison was totally, flummoxed by it. I was interviewing a couple of years ago Robert Temple, who wrote The Serious Mystery. I don't know if you guys remember that. It came out in the 1970s. It was a big deal. It linked this weird tribe in Africa, the Dogon, to ancient Egypt, and the Dogon seemed to have some knowledge about Sirius, the dog star, that it was a binary star. You can't see this with the naked eye, but the Dogon had built this whole religion around it, right?
Yep.
Well, Temple had written Serious Mystery. It came out, and then he wrote, a follow-up later, and there were intelligence agents all over this thing. I mean, Temple wrote about how aggravated he was, that he was getting bothered by American intelligence operatives who were keenly interested in what he had discovered concerning this remote African tribe, this binary star system, and ancient Egypt. They had to know what was going on with this. What? Are you kidding me? So, I mean, when this stuff happens, you have to pay attention. When these things start to happen, you have to pay attention. Why would they care about this? And of course, I did a lot of research on, CIA and military intelligence and their involvements with esoteric, investigations and all of this, Operation Often, MK Ultra, all of this stuff involves consciousness. It involves the manipulation of consciousness. And there was the dovetailing with the UFO research that the government was doing at the time, dovetailing with the remote viewing stuff with Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ out there at SRI. Right. All of these things start to come together, and you're looking at a completely different worldview. And that's what's so scary.
And it's funny. You just mentioned names that are involved in everything else.
Yeah,
right. And
that's the point.
and I had said in my intro today, and I was so excited about having you on, that I was losing sleep last night thinking about how complex the conspiracy, the big lie, has gotten. And what I had referenced is the big lie, which is just lying to the status quo, just lying so you can move forward. The big lie has been going on in some context for millennia. It's been going on. How do you control the masses? Well, tell them God did it. Tell them this. Tell them that. Do whatever you have to do to keep everybody off of the truth so they can continue to work, continue, farming, continue to pay taxes, and to continue respecting the ruling elite. Let's not lose sight of that. And now the big lie is the big norm, and it is bizarre. And so it involves everything that we are taught now. It goes to things like the space program, what is taught in textbooks about Apollo, or Wernher von Braun, or the Kennedy assassination, or World War II, or Vietnam, World War I. Go back. You can continue to go backwards. And the big lie is constantly there, to the point today we don't know anything. Everything that we are taught or told in mass media or in books is simply not true. And do we really move forward with that kind of mindset? And I have an issue with that now. My head is just tripping out. And when you go and you speak about the things that you speak about, and that's what I said tonight, you have to listen to what Peter has to say, because everything that you think is making sense around you, whether you're conspiracy or not, is probably not true. And how do you deal with that, Peter? I mean, seriously, because that's exactly what you write about, whether it's the esoteric or whether it's Nazi influence in the Middle East that is happening today. The untruth is there. How do you deal with it?
Well, it's difficult if I'm watching the regular media, if I'm watching cable news, no matter what channel it is, and I'm being told these stories, and I know a lot of the background of what they're discussing. I either get very angry, I get like I want to shout at the television screen, or I start laughing uncontrollably because it's hysterical. The disconnect between what you're being told and what actually has taken place, what's actually happened, is so big. And yet they blithely go on. I mean, the people in our news media probably do believe most of what they're telling us. They probably believe that is the real world. I've watched people on both sides of the aisle, follow, the main story, whatever the party line happens to be. And I don't mean party in terms of Democrat, Republican. I mean party in terms of the party, the only party that counts, right? And they'll just swallow it and move right along. And it's really frustrating quite often, because I'm watching this stuff and I really want them to, get a sense of perspective on what they're talking about, but they won't, because I can see what's happening. I remember being in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia when the towers came down on 9/11. And my first reaction right out of the box is, I know what we're going to do. We're going to go and bomb some country, no matter who. This is how we're going to react, because this story is tailor-made for us. This is the excuse we've been waiting for. It's our Reichstag fire. This is going to give us the entree into doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And that's, of course, exactly what happened. And I was in a Muslim country when it happened. I knew that, Muslims were going to get blamed, Arabs were going to get blamed, whoever was going to get blamed, whoever was the flavor of the week was going to get blamed for this. And there was enough evidence that would lead us to believe that that was really the story. That was fine. I'm not one of these 9/11 guys who runs around saying that, it was a Zionist plot or something. But we made use of it, and it's the use we made of it that was such a tragedy and such a disaster that I knew it was coming just from the moment those towers went down. Because we will have a media that is massaged. The message will be massaged. They will tell us whatever it is they want us to hear, and then we're going to go on a war footing just immediately for that reason.
Why is it that society today, I mean, half of it, I should say, but is comfortable and not willing to go back and prosecute the lies that were presented to us about not only 9/11 but to invade Iraq? I mean, all of it was false and falsified documents and a false presentation, but nobody seems to care.
Well, why should Iraq have been any different? You know what I mean? I mean, why is that a special case? And that's the reason, because it wasn't a special case. It was business as usual. We went off on a tangent there. It looked like to the rest of the world, but it wasn't. We had been off on a tangent in the Middle East since World War I. So this was nothing new. This was to be expected. Yes, there were lies. There was deception. There were people who probably have been arrested over this. At least there should have been prosecutions. There should have been something in public and airing out of this, because it was so damaging to us in so many ways, but it wasn't going to happen. And every time there's a terrorist attack, quote unquote, that leads further credence to the fact that, we have to leave this alone. We cannot prosecute these things because, quote unquote, we are at war, right? So since we are at war, as if we're in the middle of World War II, the same mentality applies. We can't prosecute anybody. We can't prosecute our own. Let's deal with this problem first, before we go and start being self-reflective about it. So we're screwed, basically, where this is concerned. Because every time we're going to start getting out of something, we're going to extricate ourselves from one of these issues, we're going to find some other reason to go right back in again. This is the state of constant war that, the old German philosophers were talking about, who influenced Hitler so much, that the natural state of man is the state of war. I believe it was Ludendorff who said that. And he was another mystic and another occultist, another guy who wound up being, talking to spirits and everything else. And here was a guy who was, extremely important to Hitler and Hitler's worldview. And he's a guy who thought that the only natural state, the only really, positive state for humanity is to be in a state of constant war. That was our natural state. And we've pretty much, followed that dictum since then, since the end of World War II.
I don't think we've ever not been at war, somewhere.
Not in my lifetime.
Yeah, somewhere. If you were, Peter, you've got so much data and research that you have done. If you were sitting with somebody that was questioning the world and they wanted evidence of a secret society, somebody, controlling the puppet strings, if you will, and you were able to present your best piece of evidence about a ruling elite, an undercurrent, what would that be?
Wow, I wouldn't know where to begin. There are just so many. The thing is that none of these things exist so none of these events exist by themselves. You could pick out, the Kennedy assassination is a great example, or you can pick out, the Vietnam War as another example, or Iran-Contra. I mean, there's so many things, and they're all connected back to each other, that as soon as I start talking about one, it sort of requires me to start talking about the other. So you can't really pick one out and say this is the best example. You have to kind of look at the big picture, and you'll see the outline of the problem that we face. I talked a lot about the 1952, 1953, seance, this series of seances involving this small group up in Maine that had such tremendous influence later in world affairs. And these were people who thought they were talking to spirits, who thought they were talking to, aliens aboard a spacecraft hovering over the Earth, who gave them their marching orders to go and change the world. And these are people who had tremendous effects on everything that we've experienced in the last 40, 50, 60 years since that time. We talk about the Kennedy assassination as only one aspect of that group. It was Arthur Young, one of the members of that group, very influential, that actually gave Robert Temple, since we mentioned him, the idea for writing the book of The Serious Mystery. It was Arthur Young himself who said, why don't you do this, who introduced him to this material, and it created this phenomenon. And one of the people involved in that process was a guy called Harry Smith. And Harry Smith was a famous kind of beat guy. He collected folk music and everything else on one side. And I met Harry Smith a couple of years before he died. Harry Smith was also a very dedicated occultist who was creating a film version of the Enochian tablets of Dr. Dee, to actually contact the Enochian spirits that Dee was talking to in the 17th century. Weird stuff, And all of this melded together, all of this to the Aleister Crowley groups, to, the assassinations, to, the Process Church of the Final Judgment, to Charles Manson, on and on and on and on and on.
We're going to be up against a break, and when we come back, what I'm going to have Peter do is he's speaking about the 9, and we're going to go down that list. Peter, I want you to get the names out. The people that were present at those I almost said ceremonies, those seances.
Same difference.
Yes, yeah, a literal list of who's who, not only in America, but in government, in the military establishment, the aerospace industry, and some of the richest families that lived on, Long Island at that time. That group, who was involved there, went on and were directly connected to Oswald and Werner von Braun, and which was still 8 years away, and Aleister Crowley, and of course the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. All of it was connected. And we're going to spend a little brief time on that, because on the backside of that, this actually gets connected into modern-day terrorism and what it is going on in Iraq. Peter has a way of connecting the dots, and we're going to do all of that with Peter Levenda right after this short break. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Email is jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @jchurchradio. We'll be back with Peter Levenda right after this. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
Hello, I'm Katie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station.
People love to shop. What if you could shop and it was actually good for you? What if you could actually purchase items that bettered your life? What goes into your body is important to what quality of life you have. How about shopping for items that better your health? GetTheT.com is that shopping place. We're not only tea, even though that's our #1 seller, we are about helping your health. There's Colostrum LD for those of you with autoimmune troubles. The product helps your stomach get on track. GI problems produce pain. Get relief with Colostrum LD. How about some fat burners? Or maybe some joint aid? Or a power cleanse? There's so much to tell you with very little time. So get help health-wise at GetTheT.com. That's GetTheT.com. Or you can call our friendly operators at 928-308-0408. That's 928-308-0408. Get help and relief by going shopping. Shop at GetTheT.com. That's GetTheT.com. Serving people with great products for over 8 years. GetTheT.com.
This is TalkNetwork.com.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you, and your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Let TalkStream Live transform the way you listen to radio. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mobile talk radio from TalkStream Live. Now available in the iTunes App Store.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And this is Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers. Yes. We are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
Hello, Fadernauts. Are you looking for the ultimate Bluetooth speaker system? Well, check this out. The Studio Dome surround sound system, featuring the Studio Dome 1 SD1 and the Studio Boombox SBB wireless Bluetooth speakers, is the perfect way to get surround sound without all of the cable headaches. With its own hard shell custom carrying case for taking your surround sound experience on the go. Each hard shell case comes packed with an SBB, 2 SD1s, cables, and power. It's just $99, and you use the promo code Jimmy, and you get yourself some free shipping. Once again, Studio Dome brings you the best deal on the net. Anywhere. Just go to the Studio Dome banner, JimmyChurchRadio.com, promo code Jimmy. Go Beckley Teppy.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
Welcome back to Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Peter Levenda is here. We're talking about who is really running the world today. We'll get to more of that here in just a second. Tomorrow night, Robert Sullivan IV is going to be here. We're going to talk about cinema symbolism in Hollywood. And, of course, Thursday night will be open lines all night long. Peter, the breaking news, man. North Korea, H-bomb. What do you think about that?
I didn't catch that breaking news. What happened? They say they have one?
They just tested it 1 hour ago. Yes. Hydrogen bomb. And, yeah. It's breaking right now. It's breaking. It's a pretty fluid situation, but they successfully carried out the test. And their state news agency just announced, if there's no invasion on our sovereignty, we will not use the nuclear weapon. Yeah.
Just the one, right?
Oh, man. It's a brand new day.
It sure is, man.
Ooh, man, that just... Okay. A couple of $1 million questions before we get to the 9. And I'm going to let you take a crack at this. Who is at the head of the snake? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you mentioned the snake, and I think we're talking about a hydra. I think we're talking about more than one head. One snake, many heads. And chopping off one basically doesn't help kill the snake. I think there's too many people involved in this sort of thing, and a lot of them may not even, really be aware of who the others are. If the world was really under total absolute control, it would be running a lot more smoothly than it is now. So I think what's going on is you have internecine fighting between people who really know what's going on. You have jockeying for position. In the end, people are still people. They still have greed, and they still have, self-interest, and they still have arrogance and pride. I think these things sort of mitigate against absolute total control, or else we'd all be robots or something by now. That said, though, part of what makes the control apparatus, if you want to call it that, even Jacques Vallée sort of talked in those sort of riddles, or has been talking in those riddles, the control apparatus per se, the people who get involved on that level, I believe, go through, in some cases or in some way, a form of initiation. Otherwise, it would not be possible for them to subvert themselves and to repress a lot of their natural, emotions, where this would be concerned. Now, whether we're talking about a skull and bones kind of initiation, which is, entirely possible, because let's face it, we've had a lot of bonesmen in positions of power lately in the last 20 years or so in the United States. It could be something like that. It could be some other kind of secret society. But I believe there's some kind of initiatory process involved. And I don't say this with evidence. I just say this on a gut instinct because of all the things that I've read and what people have told me over the last 20 years, 20, 30 years now, has been that there is a kind of recognition between people who are involved in this kind of control mechanism. They know who each other are. They know how this works. There was that very famous throwaway line by Ben Rich of Skunkworks, which nobody can really prove that he said, but which is revealing anyway, in which people pressed him as to how do flying saucers work, and he got exasperated. And he says, you know how ESP works? Where every point in space and time is connected? And they said, yeah. He said, that's it. That's how it works. It's that kind of intuitive understanding of the interface between consciousness and material things and matter and the real world that we see around us. It's that point of tangents between these two. That's where the power is. And you can only really appreciate that if you've experienced it yourself, if you've actually seen it or felt it, had it happen to you. And that happens through, in the old days anyway, through initiations into secret societies. There was that moment of insight when you realized that everything was not what it seemed to be, and that consciousness had power to effect change, to actually change what you see and how it's perceived and what is going on, to change people's minds, literally to change them. And I think that we really came into our own with this during World War II, when we understood how psychological warfare works, how propaganda works. Goebbels took that to an extreme, but we also did a lot of the same. C.D. Jackson, who worked for President Eisenhower, actually General Eisenhower during the war, as his chief of propaganda and psychological warfare, later comes back home to run Time Life. And he's the guy who went and bought the Zapruder film and buried it. Madison Avenue understood how you manipulate consciousness, and they learned that during the war. They learned it from the Germans, but they also learned it by developing their own tools and their own methods. Madison Avenue is basically a propaganda psychological warfare machine. And I think people who've come up within that, people who've understood that consciousness can change reality, these are the people who understand how this works and how things can be manipulated. And as soon as somebody else understands that, who's not part of the club, other change can take place, and then this kind of struggle goes on between groups with different opposing ideologies. To us, it seems like one big control mechanism. But once you're inside of it, you see that there are warring factions fighting each other for control. And I think that's what's going on.
It sounds like you're confirming my nightmare, which is this. It doesn't matter if it is the private sector or mass media or politicians or the military industrial complex or the Pentagon. When decisions are made about what to say to the public, the last thing that is on the table is the truth.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's the last thing. Everything that is going to be, presented and in a press conference or in a press release or some kind of news wire situation, it's not the truth. That's what they present. It's that propaganda. It's the selling of the machine. Am I wrong?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, the German term for propaganda translates as worldview warfare. It's worldview warfare. That's really what propaganda is. It's putting your worldview out there in place of whatever worldview we may have as natural human beings. We've grown up in the United States. We have our own worldview. But now our worldview is being changed constantly. Nobody sits around and says, oh, we've got to tell the American people the truth, right? People sit around and let's spin this. How are we going to present it? How can we tell the people what really is going on, but not in a way that they actually know what's really going on, so that we have plausible deniability later. We can walk away from this. I mean, this is what goes on, right? We all know this. This is no mystery. I mean, the Oval Office tapes would have told us that, if nothing else, right? So we know that these things, that's how these things are done. What lies do we tell? We have our agenda that we have to push through. And that means we can't go around telling people the truth, So you're not going to get anywhere, in the world the way it's created, in that great big pyramid, by telling the truth. Telling the truth is the province of, the tinfoil hat people. It's the province of the people outside the system, people that are not really part of it, people who have no power can tell the truth. Those who have power will never tell the truth. They can't.
I'm wondering if we could have a bona fide paradigm shift in this regard. Do you remember the movie Mixed Nuts? You remember that movie? In that movie, I think it's Michael Keaton.
Mixed Nuts, that sounds familiar. I must have seen it.
Yeah, Michael Keaton, he goes to a crazy house for a little bit. But he's
right.
Yeah, he's an advertising executive. And they start doing ad campaigns written by the people with, some mental problems at this hospital. And the ad campaigns all told the truth, right? And the thing that comes to mind was the Volvo, right?
Boxy, but good.
Yeah,
right?
but boxy, but it's safe.
I remember that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and as funny as that maybe, we will start to catch them in the big lie in the respect that, we don't have to rely on ABC, NBC, CBS, and Time Magazine every week. Now we have the internet, and we have a way to vet sources now and to go and look at and listen to alternative news sources. And now they have to probably consider that. And when they are presenting the big lie, well, maybe we're going to get caught. So maybe we need to tell the truth at least once in a while. Do you kind of feel that ebb and flow changing just a little bit?
Oh, sure. There's going to be a little bit of that. And, it's bread and circus, right? They're going to give us a little bit. We're going to feel a bit more comfortable, a bit more secure, lulled into that false sense of security, thinking the next thing they're going to tell us is the truth. And then the big whopper comes right down on top of that, I mean, that's really how it's going to happen. It's a manipulation of consciousness. We're thinking all the time that, what we need are people, on the outside of the system. But even that's part of the joke. Who's really outside of the system, outside enough that we can trust them to act differently and to tell the truth. That's also not going to happen. Everybody is feathering their own nest out there, and we're surrounded by people who have their self-interest ahead of ours, whether it's the interest of government, whether it's the interest of their corporation, or just their own self-interest. It's going to be at our expense, no matter what. People think that we're too stupid to know the truth. That famous line, you can't handle the truth. And that's basically what they feel about us, that we can't handle the truth. whether it's about assassinations or about wars of aggression or about invasions or, terrorist operations or whatever it happens to be, we're never going to hear the whole truth. And there's always going to be a national security excuse for that too. And sometimes that's legitimate, right? During war, during the war, World War II, we're out there, we're not going to, telegraph our intentions to the Nazis ahead of time or to the Japanese, right? So there's reasons for it. The Manhattan Project was a marvel of secrecy. No one got told the truth on that. Hate to bring it up, but Area 51, I was at a lecture a couple of years ago by T.D. Barnes, who worked at Area 51. And he said, we were not allowed even to open the window shades when there was a plane or some kind of device out there on the field. We had to close it down. We could not even ask each other we couldn't talk shop. None of that was allowed. So there's this cult of secrecy that's in our government, it's in our military, and after 9/11 it got so much worse. It became so much more infectious. Try getting a Freedom of Information Act request filled, in the last years since 9/11. It's virtually impossible. You're just not going to get any information anymore.
I read the other day, and I'm trying to find out if this is actually true, and I don't know if it's possible. But I had read the other day that no president, all the way through Obama, has ever visited Area 51.
That's true.
Is that true?
That is absolutely true, as far as I know. There's rumors that Eisenhower was going to invade it or something.
Right.
That stuff has never been proven. But from what I understand, no one has ever been there. I mean, Area 51, you were not even allowed to mention it in official documents until the Clinton administration.
Yeah,
right?
You ask if you can keep a secret. Well, there you go. There's an example of it. Okay, let's have some fun here. This is what I want to do. There's two things that I want you to present to the audience. One, we're going to discuss the 9, and we're going to take the 9 through, who they were, and we'll take that through the secret space program and Kennedy. And then we're going to go over to Iraq, okay? We're going to go to Baghdad, and we're going to discuss the Grand Mufti and Berlin and back and Saddam's regime and what is happening right now in Iraq. So there's two things that it's going to be tough, but I want to get them both in tonight. Both fascinating stories. Both are fact-checkable facts. So let's start with the 9. Who were the 9?
Well, to know the 9, let's have a little bit of context, not too much. 1952. 1952 was a great year. It was a bizarre year. In 1952, this overflight of UFOs over Washington, D.C. in July. We both remember that. We talked about it, I think, the last time.
Yes.
I was doing some research on this lately. I'm involved in a project that I can't discuss, but it's so far-ranging and so far-reaching that I'm losing my mind. Anyway, so in 1952, there's, the famous UFO flap. Now, I think a lot of people listening know that the Air Force came out and they had a press conference, the largest press conference since World War II. They made this press conference in July 29th, 1952, precisely at 4 o'clock p.m. And it was held by a guy called Major General John A. Samford, who was the director of intelligence for the U.S. Air Force, and he was kind of trying to calm everybody's fears about this situation. And if you read the transcript of that press conference, you'll notice there's a couple of things in there that are really kind of throwaway information that leads us into our story about the 9. He said, I have it right in front of me. They're asking him about, what are they? What are these things that are flying around that you're sending up jets to shoot down and et cetera, et cetera? What the hell's going on? And he responds, you can investigate. I'm quoting him. But the technique of investigating a process of mind reading, for example, or the technique of investigating the process of mesmerism, you can say you'll investigate these things. I think probably we know no more about mind reading than the technique of investigating that, or the technique of investigating spiritualism, than we do about those fields. But for many years, the field of spiritualism had these same things in it, which completely competent, credible observers reported incredible things, unquote. What the hell did that mean?
Yeah, exactly.
This was such a convoluted paragraph, and yet it seemed to satisfy people that there was somehow a connection between what was happening in the skies over Washington, D.C., those 2 weekends in July, and mesmerism, spiritualism, and mind reading. Well, that leads us into our story. 2 months later, there's a guy called Puharich, Andrea Puharich. They used to call him Hank. Let's call him Hank. It's easier. Hank was heavily involved in studying the paranormal, but he was studying it from a scientific point of view. He was fascinated by Nikola Tesla. He was fascinated by alternate theories of energy, alternate theories of communication. We know that Tesla claimed he had been in contact with Mars at one point. And Hank was following up on all of this stuff. He befriends a man called Vinod, Dr. Vinod, an Indian man from India who had come over to attend some conferences in the United States, had met Hank at sort of a cocktail party someplace in Manhattan, had run into him again on the train going out to Maine somewhere where Hank was living. And they had a discussion, and finally he convinced Vinod to come down and have a seance. Vinod evidently was a kind of mind reader, to that point. He was a mind reader. He was involved in spiritualism, although his family, in a letter to me, claimed that he wasn't. But all the information I have from everybody else who knew him said that he was. Vinod has a seance in the woods of Maine with Hank and a couple of other people. And that first seance was really strange because he starts talking in perfect, unaccented English. And he is channeling a group that calls itself the Nine. And they say that we are 9 principles and 9 forces. You know, we are some sort of strange group of beings which are later identified with the Egyptian Ennead, which are the 9 major gods of ancient Egypt, this Middle Kingdom and New Kingdom Egypt. So there's these 9 gods. And they claim to represent these 9 gods, but these 9 gods are actually in a spaceship or something. And there's these the channel is actually giving Hank Puharich mathematical formulas to prove that he's real. He's actually giving them all sorts of equations, which then Puharich claims are genuine, and he's freaking out. So he decides he's going to have a seance involving a group of people that he's going to specially invite for this process, for this really big seance he's going to have. Okay, the 9 say, we propose to work with you in some essential respects. We are forces. The nature of our work is the positive, which I found hysterical, because that's a line from a song that was popular then. The evolutional and the teleological aspects of existence, all kinds of high-sounding language. But in the end, they start saying things like, you know, peace is not really just, it's not the absence of war. You can have war and it can still exist in a state of peace. All kinds of wild stuff like that was coming out. So Hank goes and he invites his friends. Who were his friends? Well, he has a guy called and his wife Georgiana. These 2 were people he knew from the medical field, medical profession. They were working with him, with Puharich, in developing some medical equipment, some avant-garde medical equipment. So they're there. Later, Hank Jackson and Georgiana will go out and join a hospital out in California and remain there for the rest of their lives. But right now, in June 27th, 1953, here's the seance, the major seance of the 9. Along with Jackson and Georgiana, there's Arthur Young, who invented the Bell helicopter, who was part of the military-industrial complex during World War II. He left Bell Helicopter with, I suppose, a great deal of money because of his patents. He marries a woman called Ruth Forbes, who is, yes, a member of the Forbes family, that family. She's very wealthy, obviously. So Arthur Young and Ruth Forbes are married. They're attending this seance. There's Marcella DuPont. Yes, that DuPont, that family, very famous, very influential family. There's Alice Bouverie, whose maiden name was Astor, as in the Waldorf Astoria, as in John Jacob Astor. And 2 other people that are difficult to identify, a guy called Carl Betz and someone else called Vonnie Beck. So you have an Astor, a DuPont, a Forbes, you have Arthur Young himself, and you have basically the father and mother-in-law of a man called Michael Payne, Ruth Forbes' son by a previous marriage. And Michael Payne is married to Ruth Payne. And Ruth Payne lives in Texas, or will live in Texas once they're married. This is 1950. It's still a little early. Ruth Payne marries Michael Payne. They live in Texas. And eventually Ruth Payne opens her doors of her Quaker home to Lee Harvey Oswald and Marina Oswald and their children.
That is the most insane guest list possible.
Oh yeah.
I mean, who else could you add to that pile of
it's the freaking Addams family.
Yes, okay? Yes. I mean, seriously. Forbes, Astor, DuPont, the inventor of the Bell helicopter, all the way through Texas, and Lee Harvey Oswald are all sitting there channeling the 9 who are in orbit.
And just to clarify, Marcella DuPont, as an example, was a woman very involved in spiritualism already, even though she was a DuPont. She was involved in overseeing the French translation of the Urantia book. A book which is this channeled document that has become kind of well-known and powerful. There's like there's a whole society built around it, trying to decipher the writings of the Urantia book. So there she is. Not only is she part of the 9 and part of that whole operation, but with her other hand, she's involved in the Urantia book, which you can find online everywhere, and it's, Amazon and all the rest of it. Alice Bouverie is actually Ava Alice Muriel Astor. She was the daughter of John Jacob Astor IV, the guy who died on the Titanic. She married multiple times. She married 4 times, at least. And her mother was the Lady Ribbonsdale. She was one of the financial supporters of Nikola Tesla. And her estate in England, the Cliveden estate, was the scene of a lot of very heavy occult rituals and seances. Stephen Ward lived on that estate for a while. He was involved in the Profumo affair, which was this affair where a British minister was the same prostitute as a Russian defense minister in England. It was a major scandal. It broke shortly before the Kennedy assassination. Some people have tried to link these two events together, actually. Well, they actually had to have exorcisms at Stephen Ward's cottage on the Cliveden estate in England, which was the Astor's estate. There's all kinds of wild stuff with this, and I'm just scratching the surface here.
I have a friend that is texting me right now. Man, I'm just going to say this. He's a heavyweight in Hollywood. And he's going, dude, I got to call you right now with an Alan Dulles question. So he's obviously listening to the show. And
well, we know the Alan Dulles question.
Yeah,
where the 9 is concerned.
Yes,
that's really scary too.
Yes, and Russell, if I'll watch the phone lines. If you want to call in, I'll break the rules. Okay. I know he's listening right now. Okay, yeah, so let's do Alan Dulles. We might as well throw him in the mix.
Well, let's throw him in the mix because here's this little group of 9 people, like no big deal, right? But Ruth Forbes, was a very interesting lady. And her best friend, her BFF, was a woman called Mary Bancroft. Mary Bancroft was Alan Dulles' mistress, going back to the old OSS days in Switzerland and beyond. So they were thick as thieves, Mary Bancroft and Ruth Forbes. So when Ruth Payne, I know there's a lot of names to keep track of here, that makes you nuts, but Ruth Payne was that got Lee Harvey Oswald his job at the Texas School Book Depository. Hello. So, seriously, right?
I know. It's just the craziest story ever.
I mean, this is all checkable. You guys can go out and check these facts. They are absolutely there. They're solid, just that nobody puts them together and talks about them. So, there's Ruth Payne, sweet Quaker lady, I suppose. I actually met her as well. This is another story.
She looks Quaker-ish.
She looks Quaker-ish, yes.
Yes.
Yes, she does. And she goes, before the Warren Commission, right? Big deal. This is Ruth Payne. Oswald lived with her, I mean, on and off. Marina did live with her for some time, for a month or 2 months or something. She gave birth to her second child, with Ruth Payne there, present at the hospital and all the rest of this. So she's before the Warren Commission, and she's about to go into detail about her relationship to Arthur Young. She's going to talk about what she took, about 2 months before the assassination, where she's driving up from Texas all the way up to Philadelphia, where Arthur Young estate is located, Arthur and Ruth Forbes Payne Young. She's going to visit them, and she's going to go from there to visit the Forbes Island off the coast of Cape Cod out there in Provincetown. So she's been visiting all these people, and she's about to talk about this. She's just about to bring it up. Astronauts, go to your, to your Warren Commission volumes there, or look at it online. Download the transcript of Ruth Payne talking to the Warren Commission, where she's just about to say who she was visiting in Philadelphia, Arthur Young and Ruth Forbes Payne. Alan Dulles is sitting there. He's part of the commission. He's present at the time. His name is on the roster. He suddenly derails that conversation immediately and has her talk about something else entirely, as if he's going, let's talk about something else, and basically moves the conversation totally off that part. He will not allow Ruth Payne to sit there and talk about her visit to Arthur Young and Ruth Forbes. It's not going to happen, not in front of the Warren Commission. So it doesn't happen. We never hear about it.
Wasn't it actually removed from the official transcriptions that were released to the press?
Well, there's a possibility, but the Ruth Payne transcript is there. I've read it. It's part of the official document. I think that Mary put it up as well on her website, God bless her. So I think that, I think it's available. You can read it. But there might have been something excised. I don't doubt that for a second. I mean, it's quite possible that Dulles or somebody would have taken a chunk out of that transcript that it never saw the light of day. But I came across Ruth Payne. I came across this slight reference to Philadelphia, slight reference to this trip, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, what am I looking at? This is not possible. Not Arthur Young. No. This can't be true. And so I thought, okay, here we have the scandal of the century here. We have these occultists. I mean, Arthur Young at this time was known by 1963 as being heavily involved in the study of consciousness. He was dedicated to this. And he's, studying ESP, studying astrology and yoga and everything else. And here's this connection to Lee Harvey Oswald. And I think, okay, this is bad enough by itself. And then years later, a reader, one of my readers, someone who was reading one of my Sinister Forces, sent me an email and said, well, do you realize that George de Mohrenschildt, who was this strange Russian emigre who considered himself a friend of Oswald, who wrote a book about Oswald just before he supposedly committed suicide, de Mohrenschildt, in his address book, the one they found on his person or in his room after he committed suicide, the address book contained the name of a guy called Wasson. And this man called Wasson was a specialist in magic mushrooms, right, in psilocybin and researching mushrooms in Latin America. Wasson was doing this for the Nine. He was doing this for Hank Puharich, Andrea Puharich of the original Nine. He was supposed to be in telepathic communication with Puharich at the time he was dropping mushrooms in Mexico, right? So he wasn't able to continue the experiment. This is all part of the record. So we have George de Mohrenschildt with his connection to the Nine. We have Ruth Payne with her connection to the Nine. They all knew Oswald. They were part of Oswald's inner circle. The poor guy didn't have a chance.
What are the odds? Have you ever even tried to calculate with the population of the known world, with the people present at the seance, and the odds of all of them, well, not all of them, being connected to Oswald, who would later be accused of being the lone gunman killing and assassinating Kennedy. What are the? It's got to be astronaut. It's you can't calculate it.
Well, it has to be, because let's face it, Oswald was not well educated. Oswald, barely got out of high school. Went into the Marines right away. He had this bizarre facility for languages because he was able to speak Russian well enough that he fooled Marina into thinking he was Russian.
Right.
And that's hard to do. Take it from someone who studied Russian. That is a very difficult language to learn and to speak correctly. But Oswald managed to do it. But beyond that, this is not a guy with connections. This is not a guy who was part of the hoi polloi. He would not have been hanging out with DuPonts and Astors and Youngs and Paynes and Forbes in his life. That was never going to happen. So the odds against that have to be astronomical.
Yeah,
really astronomical.
Counter spy, maybe a counter spy. We don't know. Ties to Cuba.
Sure.
The Soviet, not only the Soviet side, but Cuba, Mexico City, New Orleans, traveling around, and it's somehow tied and connected to all of this to later be at the book depository where he got the job. It's like stop. Now, get me off of this crazy train.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's beyond belief. I mean, there's more to it, and I'm still researching it, and I'm still coming up with more things. There's more to this, but it just keeps going around in that same circle. It's all this basically around Lee Oswald, and it's occultism involving a lot of eccentric, rich white people. I mean, this is the old money. These are the old money families, DuPonts and Astors and Forbes. Oh my! I mean, these are the people that came over in the Mayflower. We're talking about very powerful families involved in some very strange occult practices and spiritualist practices. I mean, one of the other people I haven't spoken of was the married couple, the Yugoslavian couple that Andrija Puharic, his first gig, you might say, as an independent operator. He was going to join Kaiser Permanente Hospital out in California. What happened was this married couple, a violinist and his wife, convinced him, gave him money. I think it was $200 a month or something, which in 1950 money was a lot of money.
Right.
And they set him up in this operation. Now, okay, a Yugoslavian guy and his wife, no big deal. But his wife was Joyce Borden of Borden milk fame, part of that dynasty of Borden. So Joyce Borden was married to this Yugoslavian violinist, very, very famous violinist, who played at the funeral of Nikola Tesla. So the circle gets tighter and tighter and tighter. So you have a Borden that you have to throw into this mix, along with the Astor and the Forbes and everybody else. Now you have the Borden money. And she had yachts, and she was sailing around the world with her husband, and they were playing in concerts in Europe and all the rest of it. And they were very close friends with Marshal Tito of Yugoslavia, because they were Nazi, which meant they were kind of pro-socialist in those days. Got into trouble with the McCarthy people for a short time, got out of it. But this was the circle around Puharic and around the Nine. So now you have Joyce Borden, and Joyce Borden was very much involved in theosophy. She was involved with people who were around Annie Besant and Alice Bailey, who were big names in theosophical circles. So it goes on and on and on. This idea of there's a mystical, supernatural patina over all of this is something that really screwed up Jim Garrison. He had no clue what any of this meant. The poor guy was at sea. He wrote letters,
Oh, I think we lost you there for a second, Peter. Are you there? The
charisma aspect of all this.
Yeah, we lost you for a quick second, but I want to talk about the family photograph that was taken in Dallas the day of the assassination. That right there is like the most telling. When somebody just tweeted, we're talking, and they call it conspiracy theory, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
but the family photograph. Who's sitting on that couch?
Well, you got your Ruth Payne sitting there, the Quaker lady who was responsible for all this stuff, whether deliberately or not. But there she was, Texas School Book Depository. There she was with Marina and Lee. She wanted to learn Russian, et cetera, et cetera. Daughter-in-law of Arthur Young, and Ruth Forbes. So there she is sitting there. She's sitting there with Marina Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald's wife, Russian wife, niece of a Russian military intelligence officer, by the way. And next to her is Margarite Oswald. This is Oswald's mother. And they're all sitting there. This is a family portrait taken the day, I think, the day following the assassination. I think Lee was still alive, if I'm not mistaken, when that picture was taken. So that would have meant the day after the assassination. He didn't last very long. So what's interesting about this picture, there's a few things, but the one that always stands out in my mind is Margarite. You know, what is Margarite doing there? What is Margarite's function in all of this? Margarite was a very mysterious person to me. She, on the one hand, looked like she was some kind of an opportunist. She was trying to maybe make money off of this thing, wanted to become a celebrity. I don't know. Probably a little cuckoo. Don't know. Can't really say. But a couple of years, or maybe just shortly after, I think it was just shortly after the assassination, you know, Margarite had a lot of memorabilia of Lee Harvey Oswald. She had a lot of stuff, correspondence, things that should have gone probably to the Warren Commission, which never seemed to make it there because the stuff's not mentioned. And so she either looks around for a literary agent or somebody to represent her, a press representative of some kind, a press agent, and she finds one, or one finds her. And the person who finds her is a guy who fought in World War II, on our side, evidently, but who, prior to the outbreak of World War II for the United States, prior to our entry into the war, was a member of the German Secret Service. He was an American, born in the United States, who then grew up as a young man, as a teenager, swore an oath of loyalty to Adolf Hitler, and was actually made a card-carrying member of the Sicherheitsdienst, of the Secret Service, the German Secret Service, the SD. And then World War II breaks out. He's drafted or enlists, I don't know. He spends the war years in the Navy, I believe. At the end of the war, he's part of Operation High Jump in the Arctic, in the Antarctica. This bizarre, we don't know what the hell the purpose of that was, trip where we sent an entire convoy down to Antarctica when we don't have the money, we don't have the resources, we certainly don't have the personnel, but we decide to send this entire flotilla down to Antarctica to hang out there for a couple of weeks and come back. He was part of that trip. And as he comes back, it turns out he follows his initial dream, which was to be part of the German Secret Service. He becomes part of the Nazi underground. He becomes part of Odessa. He becomes chummy with every Nazi war criminal who's on the way out, who's trying to escape. He knows Otto Skorzeny personally, Hitler's favorite commando. He knows Hans Ulrich Rudel, Hitler's favorite pilot. He knows Otto Remmer, the guy who broke up Operation Valkyrie and had Tom Cruise executed. My God. This is the people that he hung out with. He was a rabid, unapologetic Nazi. And now he's representing Margarite Oswald. The guy's name was Keith Thompson. Again, you can look this up. It's findable anywhere. So here's this guy representing Margarite Oswald. And I'm thinking, well, what does that mean now? Come on, give me a break, right? And I start peeling away the layers of this thing. It seems that nobody really knew that Lee Oswald initially, before he defected to Moscow, he got out of the Marines and he decides he wants to go to college. And he doesn't go to college like at Texas A&M or something, you know. Where does he go? He picks the Albert Schweitzer College, which is a tiny college in Switzerland in the Alps. There's maybe, 100 people in this thing.
That's right.
How he finds it, nobody knows, because nobody knew about it. This was like a need-to-know basis kind of school. He writes a letter to them saying he wants to join the school. He wants to go to college there because he wants to learn German. Okay. Now, learning to speak German doesn't automatically make you a Nazi, okay? But, everything else that we're talking about, you start to get a very strange feeling. So he decides he wants to go there. He sends $20 for his application fee. $20, in 1960 was a lot of money.
Yep.
And he had no academic credentials at all. He had no academic qualifications. He had been in the Marines. That was it. They accept him at this university. It's all done. It's a done deal. He leaves the United States. He's on his way to Switzerland, takes the detour, winds up in Moscow, and the rest is history.
But it just shows you the influence of what is happening around you, and nobody talks about this. The history books they don't, and that is part of the big lie. It is absolutely fascinating to me, Peter. So now, but this is what I want to do now. We've got to change things, but again, all of this is still interconnected, and we can possibly, if we have the time, we can go back and actually connect the dots with the Grand Mufti all the way back to Dallas if we need to, and before. So let's talk about who is the Grand Mufti out of Iraq, Baghdad. Who was he? Let's connect him back to Berlin, and then we're going to swing it back to Iraq and what is going on today. Who is the Grand Mufti?
Well, the Grand Mufti, his name was Amir al-Husseini. He was a member of a very influential family in Jerusalem. In those days, it was Palestine. It was not yet Israel. Israel had not yet been created. We're talking World War I. So the Grand Mufti was a very charming sort of individual. He had sort of Aryan features, which is something that's going to become important later. And he was a man who at first fought against the Allies. He was fighting on the side of the Ottoman Empire. We have to fall back just a little bit earlier. World War I, as you know, if you watch the movie Lawrence of Arabia, it'll probably give you a pretty good background. You have the Turks who are controlling a large swathe of the Middle East. They have Saudi Arabia, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, all the way up to Iraq. This is all part of Turkish territory. The Brits had Egypt for the most part. The Italians had Libya, Ethiopia. So you had the place was cut up by a lot of different groups and factions. And that's the context, that's the era in which the Grand Mufti grew up as a child. During World War I, he fought against the Allies, I believe. I think he fought on the side of the Ottomans, on the side of the Turks. But at the end of the war, there was this agreement between the British and the French to basically betray the Arab revolt. Again, if you see the movie, Lawrence of Arabia, it's actually kind of accurate where these things are concerned, although dramatized. But basically, these are the facts. The British and the French carved up the Middle East between them, betrayed the idea of the Arab revolt. Promises were made, they were not kept. So the Grand Mufti is growing up in this circumstance. World War I is over. The Arabs are supposed to have their independence. They're supposed to be controlling their own destiny. King Faisal, who is Prince Faisal rather, who is the leader of the group that runs Mecca and Medina. He's part of that family that controls that, is sidelined by the British. This is where the problem started. This is how the Mufti started. This is how everything we're experiencing today started. For some reason, the Brits decided not to back Faisal as the rightful king of Saudi Arabia. There was no Saudi Arabia yet, just Arabia. They went to a guy called Saud, and Saud was a Wahhabi. Saud was a fundamentalist Muslim, and the Brits decided to back him as king of this new Arabian territory and sideline Faisal. Faisal wanted to create a pan-Arab unity kind of thing. The Brits and the French didn't like that. They stuck him in Damascus for a while. They got rid of him in Damascus. Then they made him the king of Iraq. He had nothing to do with Iraq. He wasn't part of the Iraqi society. He had nothing to do. They made him king of Iraq. They made Saud the king of Arabia, which now became Saudi Arabia, named after his own family. And the Grand Mufti is now in Jerusalem, and the British have just told everybody, oh, by the way, we forgot to tell you, we're going to create a Jewish state here, where you guys are living. So suddenly, the Mufti, this is a religious leader who got his title. Mufti is a religious leader. A Grand Mufti is the head of Islam teaching and jurisprudence and that sort of thing for that particular region. He was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. He became the head of the religious life of Muslims in Jerusalem.
And I want to interject, and we're going to be up against a break here in a second, and we'll take that break. But he was as charismatic and good-looking as a leader could be. He was exactly what everybody looked up to at that time. He carried himself, educated, he was all that.
All that. And he suddenly begins to think, when he's watching what happens around him, the British and the French carving everything up, a Jewish homeland in Palestine, he's starting to believe that the protocols of the learned elders of Zion were true. This hoax document that the Nazis used as an excuse for the Holocaust, this document that says the Jews are getting together with the Freemasons and they're trying to create a world order, a global conspiracy to overturn all the countries and to control everything, which was a hoax created by Russian Secret Service. It's a long story, but Hitler believed it and a lot of Nazis believed it. Now the Arabs are believing it because they're looking around and it looks like it's actually taking place.
That's right.
And the Mufti seizes on this and starts the revolt against the British as early as the 1920s, and then later becomes a major feature in this entire operation, which I guess you're up against the hour, so I'll fall back.
We've got 2 minutes. Go.
2 minutes?
Continue.
Oh,
Yes.
I can talk fast, as you know. So what happens is, in the 1920s, a series of revolts take place against British control and against the Jews who are being shipped over. Some Jews are getting in, and there's fights with the Jews leading up to World War II, right? So we have this intense situation of revolts, and the British themselves, the British troops in Palestine, are kind of pro-Arab in all of this. They really didn't want to go along with this whole Israeli mandate thing that was going to happen, this idea of creating a state of Israel. Their mandate was to sit there and keep the peace, and if the Arabs wanted to shoot at a couple of Jews, what was it to them? So the British were kind of pro-Arab in this and anti-Semitic anyway. So this thing is boiling over, and then 1933 happens. Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany. Adolf Eichmann, who prided himself on speaking Yiddish and Hebrew and Arabic, goes to the Middle East to see what kind of deals he can cut in this region. He meets with the Grand Mufti, he meets with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they start forming these ideas, what can we do to help each other out? And the Mufti looks at Hitler as though Hitler is the savior they've been waiting for, someone who's going to stand up to the West, someone who's going to stand up to both Russia, the Soviet Union on one side, and the capitalist countries on the other, and throw out the Jews, and et cetera, all the things the Grand Mufti wants, he's getting out of Adolf Hitler.
And then he travels to Berlin, and we're gonna now. This is the grand setup actually for the entrance of Saddam Hussein, his regime. We're gonna get to that in a second, and then and how the events of today that are going down right now in the Middle East. All of this was the catalyst of what we are talking about now. It's a fascinating story. When we come back after the break, the Grand Mufti travels to Berlin, and he gets paraded in the streets. And we're going to talk about that right after this short break. Our guest tonight is Peter Levenda, the man that can seriously connect the dots. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses on KGRA and TalkNetwork.com. We'll be back right after this.
Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
KGRA Radio. Intelligent talk.
Why do people order Life Change Tea? Because Life Change Tea helps the digestive system. Life Change Tea helps the colon unclog. The tea also helps with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and many, many other health issues. Life Change Tea also tastes great. And Life Change Tea is not just green tea. Life Change Tea is a unique blend of 8 different herbs that go to town, cleaning your body of harmful toxins, bacteria, and parasites. Our tea is number 1. Are you ready for your life change? Let the tea help you. Log on to our online store of helpful products to get your body on track. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Or you can call us at 928-308-0408. That's 928-308-0408. Not all tea is equal. Read our website of all the factual testimonies that prove that Life Change Tea is working. Health is important, and our quality of life is very important. Don't wait to order. Expect a life change with Life Change Tea at getthetea.com.
Hi, I'm Richard Dolan. When I'm not hosting my radio program, The Richard Dolan Show on KGRA, or writing new books on UFOs, I run a publishing company. I'm proud to say that Richard Dolan Press has published some of the most fascinating books available on UFOs and related subjects. They include Dr. Bruce Maccabee's classic analysis of the UFO cover-up, David Marler's breakthrough book on triangular UFOs, Dr. Richard Sauter's unique work on underground bases, and other classics by Grant Cameron, Chase Kletsky, and Dr. Bob Wood, not to mention intriguing works by Eve Lorgan and Laurie MacDonald that deal with truly bizarre phenomena. I'm proud to publish such high quality and original works, and there are several amazing books about to be released over the next few months. Go to richarddolanpress.com to learn more.
This is TalkNetwork.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Tappy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why fade to black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
Welcome back to Fade to Black. Tonight, our guest is Peter Levenda. We are putting it together for you. We are connecting the dots. Who is really controlling the world? Tomorrow night, Robert Sullivan IV is with us. Hollywood cinema symbolism will be the topic for tomorrow night. Now, what we're talking about here, and I want to kind of reset for everybody, is right now in the Middle East, what is going on there? So we've backed up. And the Grand Mufti is Hitler's choice. They meld their minds together. They both actually agree on their agendas. And Hitler turns around. He embraces the Grand Mufti, and he brings him to Berlin. And he introduces him to not only the Nazi Party, but now I'm going to let you pick up right there, Peter, because the Grand Mufti ends up going back to the Middle East with a vision of organization and what down to the uniforms. You know what I mean? About what organization and structure to him is correct. Now, so let's start there. He goes to Berlin, and what happens?
Well, he goes to Berlin, and he becomes the darling of people like Heinrich Himmler and some of the other Nazi hierarchy, because here's a man who can actually turn the tide of war in the Middle East to the Nazis' benefit. If he can rouse the people, the Arabs in that region, to fight against the British and the Americans and whoever else they're throwing at them, then the Nazis have a shot at the Suez Canal. And with the Suez Canal, they have a shot also to the oil fields in the Middle East. And, of course, they also want the oil fields up in the Caucasus and all the rest of it. So here is a chance for the Nazis to do this. And they can do this by using the Grand Mufti in two different ways. First, for propaganda purposes. They put him up in a villa in Berlin, in a very exclusive neighborhood. And he broadcasts constantly in Arabic messages to the Middle East, to his brothers in the Middle East, telling them to rise up in support of the Nazis against the British. He's inciting acts of terrorism by the Arabs living in that part of the world to go and attack British installations, to attack all the allies in general, whoever, including, of course, at this point, the Russians. This is a replay of World War I. In World War I, the Turks were against the Russians on the one side and the British and the French on the other, and in support of the Germans. Now in World War II, virtually the same breakdown is taking place. So what happens is the Mufti is now broadcasting constantly, and then they raise an army, basically, in the former in what would become Yugoslavia, among the Bosnian Muslim recruits. They actually raise an army of a Muslim division called the Hanshar, or the Mountain Division, with SS officers who are Muslim, with imams to lead the religious aspect of the thing. And you have photographs of the Grand Mufti actually reviewing these troops that are being sent into battle, Muslim troops who have heeded the call to jihad. Now, this is an important, really important point, because we hear this word jihad all the time. We hear global jihad mentioned all the time. In today's context, with ISIS and with Al-Qaeda and everything else, we're always hearing about this jihad thing.
And the Muslim Brotherhood.
And the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, what you have in this case, in this particular instance, is you have a concept, global jihad, that did not exist in that form until World War I. There was no such thing as a global. There was jihad always. You had jihad from the spiritual sense, where you had to struggle with yourself against, spiritual obstacles. That's like the common understanding of jihad. But there's also the jihad where you rise to the defense of your Muslim brothers and sisters against an invader or something like that. But there was never this idea of a global jihad. We're going to go to war against everybody in the whole world who's not a Muslim. This idea was created by a German, by an archaeologist called Max von Oppenheim. And Max von Oppenheim had gone to the Kaiser in World War I and said, listen, Kaiser, go to the head of the Turks, convince them to utter a call, to issue a fatwa for global jihad. Make all the Muslims around the world rise up against the colonial powers. In other words, the British and the French. Not the Germans, please, just the British and the French, and the Russians. And they went for it, and the Turks did this, and they did issue the fatwa. And they told all the Muslims around the world to rise up against their colonial oppressors. And it didn't happen. This shows you how much they listened to fatwas. The Arabs were too busy fighting amongst each other, too busy fighting the Turks, everybody trying to get a piece of the action. There were tribal conflicts, religious conflicts, cultural conflicts, linguistic conflicts. There was every kind of division you can imagine. And it didn't work. The jihad in World War I didn't work, and the jihad in World War II didn't work until after World War II. Then it suddenly started to work. Because at that point you had the Muslim Brotherhood being created in Egypt, which was telling people the reason we're so oppressed by the colonial powers is because we've lost the faith. The West is decadent. We're sort of sucking up to the West, to that kind of decadence. We've lost our way in the world. We have to find out who we are. We have to develop a brotherhood that's going to band together against the oppressor. This is what we have to do. We need to create the struggle against foreign, Western capitalism, communism, and decadence. So gradually the story started to change. With World War II, it was against the Jews, it was against the British and the French, against the idea of the creation of Israel, the state of Israel. That electrified the opposition, the Muslim Brotherhood, but also a lot of new commando organizations started to grow up. World War II is over. The Nazis have lost. The Grand Mufti goes into hiding. He goes back to the Middle East. He makes contact with the Muslim Brotherhood. He makes contact with a bunch of other groups, particularly the groups that are now going to grow up and become the Palestine Liberation Organization, become Al-Fatah, become the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. All these groups will come out of this turmoil that started in World War I and that really reached a boiling point at the end of World War II, when everybody suddenly realized Hitler was not coming to rescue them. They would have to do this themselves.
Now, what happened? Let's kind of move forward a little bit with the Grand Mufti and what was left of his little Nazi SS/Muslim troops and corps and ideology. You know, that now flows into Iraq, and we have a young Saddam Hussein that is observing and wants to move forward, and that happens next. Connect those dots for us. I mean, I don't want to I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it is one of the fascinating turning points in modern history, and it happened right there in about 1955.
Yeah, it did. The 1950s in the Middle East were just incredibly chaotic, because you had the creation of the State of Israel, of course, which was in 1948, and suddenly, all hell breaks loose. There's massive invasions. The Israelis fight them off, and this suddenly creates this situation where you have Palestinian refugees. So you have that one thing is boiling right there. They're kind of a proxy. They're pawns in a conflict which is much bigger than they are. And they eventually come to realize this, but there's nothing much they can do. The Grand Mufti then becomes involved in all kinds of political machinations, all kinds of political intrigues to try to get the Jews out of Israel, which doesn't look like it's going to happen, and then trying to form nationalist Arab governments in Egypt. Of course, you had one. You had Nasser eventually take over. The generals took over in Egypt. They became very powerful. They started working with the Nazi underground in a very direct way. The Mufti made that possible. He helped to sort of grease the wheels where that was concerned. He was able to convince commandos who were now running for their lives. They were war criminals. They were members of the SS. Convince them to go into Egypt and to go into other countries in the Middle East to fight against Israel on behalf of the Arabs. And then with Saddam Hussein, you have the Ba'ath Party. Now, the Ba'ath Party was socialist, basically. It was a kind of leftist Arab party. It had leftist ideas. It was more secular than it was sacred. Saddam Hussein was not a religious leader by any stretch of the imagination, but he did come of age in World War II in Iraq under what was then the rulership of Prince Faisal and Faisal's, at that point, King Faisal, and the family that came after King Faisal, his own successors. These were people who were on the other side of the Wahhabi, of the sort of very right-wing fundamentalist Islam and the kind of left-wing Islam. Saddam Hussein was kind of part of that. He was part of the opposition to a strict Wahhabi or Salafi interpretation of Islam. What Saddam Hussein really cared about was getting rid of foreign elements out of Iraq. He wanted the British out of there because the British were still there. The British had carved up that territory and were holding on to it for dear life. There were terrorist operations against the British and the French in that region, both during World War II and after. Saddam Hussein was part of the underground who was trying to get rid of the other people out there. And eventually Hussein, as we all know, eventually kills off a lot of his opposition and winds up becoming the leader of Iraq. One of the reasons why he was hated by Osama bin Laden and people like that and Al-Qaeda was because he was secular. He was not a religious leader. He was hardly religious. His sons were nowhere near religious. So there was not this idea of Wahhabi kind of Islam with Saddam Hussein. But he was, a dictator. He was a kind of fascist, an Arab fascist, who took his inspiration from people like the Grand Mufti.
Did him and the Grand Mufti ever have a chance to hang out and talk?
I believe they did. There's a lot of mystery about the Mufti from this period all through the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. He was extremely active, sometimes with the Muslim Brotherhood, sometimes he fell out with the Muslim Brotherhood, sometimes with the Ba'ath Party people in Iraq, sometimes he fell out with them as well. He was really trying to see how he could sort of parlay his Nazi connections, which were considerable, and the Nazi money that these connections represented, and parlay that into an active force against Israel and to create a separate, unified state in Palestine. But his views were even grander than that. He really did want to create a caliphate. He did want to create a strong, united Muslim government in the Middle East. He attended the famous meeting in Indonesia in Jakarta in Bandung, the famous Bandung Conference, which was a way of bringing together all those countries, those third world countries, that did not want to be part of the sphere of influence of either the Soviets or the Americans, people who wanted to do their own thing. So there were a lot of Arab leaders there, African leaders and all of that. The Grand Mufti was part of that. He was politicking around there to try to see what he could do. But the problem was, for us now, what's happening in the world today. The problem was the Germans had tried to call for a global jihad, and it failed. Failed in World War I, failed in World War II. But now we're in the 1950s, and now we have a Cold War against the Soviet Union. It may turn into a shooting war at any moment. So what happens? Nothing fails like failure. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What do? The CIA decides they're going to go to Munich. They're going to help finance a mosque and then finance this elaborate operation to try to convince all the Muslims living in the Central Asian republics under the Soviet Union to band together in a jihad against the Soviet Union. They follow the Mufti's playbook to the letter. They follow Max von Oppenheim's playbook. They follow all of these failed experiments. They decide they're going to go and do the same thing. Eisenhower, president at the time, decides this would be a pretty good idea. Let's have a holy war. Let's have the Muslims create a holy war. Let's get all the Muslims together so they can throw out the Soviet Union. Let's give them a bunch of guns. Let's give them military training. Let's do all this stuff. This way we'll get rid of the Soviet Union. The same mistake that was made by the Germans twice, now we're going to go ahead and do ourselves. In the 1950s, we put that operation into motion. We invited the Muslim Brotherhood to the United States. Eisenhower met with the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States, and the rest is history. We gave guns, training, propaganda, public relations training, all of this stuff to a bunch of people who hated each other, didn't speak the same language, had nothing in common except their religion, and we turned them into a unified force. And the rest is history.
And the old adage, right? History repeats itself, right? So we're right in the middle of that mess. And we did it again, and again, and again, all the way up to 2016. The exact same mistakes that went on for the last 75, 80 years, straight through, and we continue to do it without learning from those mistakes. And we certainly know probably less today, or as much today, about what's going on in the Middle East than we knew back in the 1800s.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why we keep trying to frame this as a religious war, as a war of religion. It is not a war of religion. Religion is the window dressing for this thing. This event is nothing to do with religion. It has to do with tribes who hate each other, cultures that hate each other, old history, there's vendettas that go back 100, 200 years. This is a balkanization of the Middle East that we had. And what we did is we got in there and tried to unify it against the Russians. And guess what? They kind of unified. They unified against us. So what's happening is blowback, is what they call in intelligence jargon blowback, unintended consequences. This has, religion, people will talk to death about Sunni and Shia. And yes, that's part of the problem. Certainly it is. But it's manipulated by people like the creators of ISIS, who were Iraqi army officers who wanted to get back at the West and who were using religion in a very cynical way to manipulate people, to use it as propaganda, as psychological warfare, as we've discussed already in the past hour, to use that to create this kind of emotional situation where they can actually have suicide bombers go out, and blow themselves up in the name of God. The people sending them out have no intentions of doing the same. They are manipulating people's religious feelings, just the way we're being manipulated here. Our patriotic feelings, our religious feelings, our cultural feelings are being manipulated for some of the same purposes. We've got to wake up and realize this is what's going on, that we're being fed, lie after lie where this is concerned to get us to do the things they want us to do.
And now let's back up again one more time. As Saddam is setting up his regime and he comes to power with the Ba'ath Party out of Tikrit, when he is doing all of this, he looks right back to World War II. He looks back at the Third Reich. He looks at Hitler. He looks at the Grand Mufti. And he says to himself, and again, this is not conjecture here, he says to himself, that's the structure that I want here in Iraq. And he models everything after, in a weird way, even his own look, after the Third Reich and his own Iraqi army. And this is something that just historians don't even touch or even talk about. But that's exactly what went down.
Sure. I mean, it just made so much sense. It's a formula that always works. You know, the strongman formula works. People look up to that. People today in Russia miss Stalin, for crying out loud. You know, one of those things that always amazed me when I used to travel a great deal in China in the 80s and 90s was that every day there was National Day, they had this huge portrait of Stalin in the middle of Tiananmen Square. And I'm thinking there's no place in the world anymore that cares about Stalin except the Chinese, because they saw him as the strongman. They saw him as, you know, the Russian equivalent of Mao Zedong. These kinds of leaders, this is what attracts people, the strongman dictatorial kind of leader. The problem that we have with groups like ISIS and groups around them is that there is no real central strongman, you know, in the sense of Saddam Hussein. So they're using religion and religious leaders to do the same thing. Saddam Hussein didn't use religion. He just said, you know, do this or else. He didn't need religion. He had, you know, the secret police and he had the army and all the rest of it. He emulated what he saw in World War II. He realized that was strength, that was power. They lost the war, but, you know, according to the Nazis, they just moved the theater of operations to the Middle East. You know, the true believers, the SS, never lost the war. As far as they were concerned, they never surrendered.
No, the ideology continued.
Yeah, absolutely. And their organization continued, and they were well funded as well. During all the 50s and 60s, they were throwing money like crazy at the PLO, at Yasser Arafat, at his groups. They were training his people. Skorzeny was in Egypt training them. They were developing missiles, weapons of mass destruction to use against Israel in the 1950s. This is all matter of public record. You know, this was the Nazi estate having just shifted from Europe into the Middle East.
And we have the ideology that is continuing from the Third Reich and the SS that went through the Muslim Brotherhood and the Grand Mufti. Yep. Entrenched into Saddam's own leadership of his own armed forces, and then we go in and defeat them. Those guys, the army may have been defeated, Saddam may have been, but the ideology continues.
Absolutely,
and
the same thing.
And that flooded out. So is that where? Is that, well, help me in my own mindset right now, and connecting the dots with some of the issues that are going on today. We dismantled everything. We thought that taking down the infrastructure, taking down the army, doing all of that was going to end that, but the ideology, the thought process continued.
Well, the thought process continued and the structure continued. You know, the same idea that we find at the end of World War II with an elaborate Nazi underground stretching all across Europe, into the Middle East, into Latin America, as far as Asia. That same idea where you have true believers, committed people who, even though their army has lost, they have not given up their fight. You have the same thing in Iraq. We destroyed the Iraqi army. We disbanded it. We forced them to throw down their guns, which was this dumbest idea that we had, because then there was no police force, there was no army, there was nothing in Iraq. We had to build it up from scratch. Plus, we had a lot of very angry Iraqi soldiers and officers up in arms against us, literally and figuratively. So now we have an underground SS, but it's a kind of Iraqi SS, which is then morphed into what we call ISIS today. The Islamic State is basically the same model. It is a non-state actor, right, which is causing all of these problems. That's exactly what the SS was. That's what Odessa was, the Nazi underground after World War II. They were non-state actors. They were committing acts of terrorism that we have conveniently forgotten. They committed acts of terrorism all through Europe. They were blowing up train stations. They were blowing up military bases. They were committing these acts, and these were right-wing, fascist, former Nazis running these campaigns against the West. They were doing that there. They were doing it in Latin America. I was at one of those places where that was being organized. So we know that this was going on with the Nazis after World War II. And now with the Iraqis, the same thing is happening after World War II. And in fact, many of those Iraqis were trained by Nazis who were trying to foment revolutions in all of those countries. So they were training Palestinians, they were training Egyptians, they were training Sudanese and Libyans, and they were training Iraqis, Lebanese, and Syrians to fight against the Western powers. So the same people who were instilling in the Iraqi officer class the anti-Semitism, the rabid nationalism, and all of this, This goes back to the Nazis. It goes back to the Grand Mufti. It goes back to World War I. We're still paying for World War I today. We are still fighting World War I today. There was never any break between the wars. You know, my insistence has always been that we're still fighting World War I. We have to call it the 100 Years' War. That war that started back then in 1914 ran on continuously until now. We're still fighting it. Yugoslavia, the Balkans, Bosnia, Sarajevo, all of this is all part of what happened from World War I. It's an inheritance from that. The Soviet Union was. All of this is an inheritance of World War I. Hitler came to power because of World War I. And now the Nazi underground, with their operations in the Middle East and in Latin America and around the world, is, what's left of World War I. Really, that's what it is. And they're continuing the fight against the rest of us. And that's what's going on with Saddam Hussein's people, who actually created ISIS. These were the Iraqi officer class that did this. These were not terribly religious people, but they were very fanatic as far as anti-Western and anti-United States, and of course anti-Israel. So you have the same philosophy, the same ideology, and now the same kind of training and the same kind of logistical support.
You must walk around with body armor. Now, Peter, we're going to be up against a break here in 2 minutes. Going back to the Arab Spring, and this is important, with the Muslim Brotherhood and what went down with Mubarak and in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood comes to power, and now we're looking at the tentacles that are reaching back underneath to everything that we have just referenced. And in a strange way, Washington was behind that because they wanted Mubarak out. And is that not learning from the past and our mistakes once again?
Well, yeah, we don't know whose side we're on. We have this black and white idea that the world is divided between friends and foes, and in the Middle East, that's the dumbest thing you can do. Because today, this guy is your enemy, tomorrow he's your friend. Everybody's negotiating everything in that part of the world. Everything is bargaining, to put it bluntly. So you can't go into a situation like that saying, this is our friend, this is our enemy. We're going to make it cut and dry just exactly this way. You can't do it. Things shift constantly in the Middle East. You can't throw all of your eggs in one basket. Every European country, every Western country that's tried to do that has failed miserably. You've got to be fluid. You've got to kind of roll with the punches out there. But the problem is you can't sell that to the American people. The American people want to know who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. They grew up on Westerns. This is what they want to see, black hats and white hats.
Right.
In the Middle East, there aren't any. In the Middle East, you better be prepared to roll with the punches and to say, okay, today he's my friend, tomorrow he might be my enemy. You have to play the angles constantly in the Middle East. There is no other way to handle this.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Peter's new project, but it's also connecting the dots. And I'm talking about Alchemy. And somehow Peter and I are going to throw Fulcanelli into the mix and get that tied in too. More with Peter. Yeah, exactly. More with Peter Levenda when we come back right after this short break. This is Fade to Black on KGRA The Planet and TalkNetwork.com. We'll be right back.
Hey, what up, y'all? Sugar Vivica Fox here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
Hi, folks. Ray Sobbs here with KGRA to tell you about something very special taking place in February 2016. I'm talking about the Space and Alien Snowfest Ufology Conference taking place at the beautiful ski and snowboard resort city of Big Bear Lake in sunny Southern California. We've got Richard Dolan, Chase Kletsky, Micah Hanks, Jason Martell, Jimmy Church, Linda Moulton Howe, Mike Barra, and keynote speaker Stanton Friedman will be presented a Lifetime Achievement Award. Oswald, George Norrie, and his producer Tom Danheiser from Coast to Coast AM Live will be with us all weekend. After the hectic holidays, gift yourself a retreat on top of the world the first weekend in February 2016 with a one-of-a-kind ufology event featuring some of the top minds in the field. Take advantage and book your lodging early and get your tickets now and register at aliensnowfest.com. I'll be there. Don't miss out.
This is TalkNetwork.com.
Hello, Fadernauts. Are you looking for the ultimate Bluetooth speaker system? Well, check this out. The Studio Dome surround sound system, featuring the Studio Dome 1 SD1 and the Studio Boombox SBB wireless Bluetooth speakers, is the perfect way to get surround sound without all of the cable headaches. With its own hard shell custom carrying case for taking your surround sound experience on the go. Each hard shell case comes packed with an SBB, 2 SD1s, cables, and power. It's just $99, and you use the promo code Jimmy, and you get yourself some free shipping. Once again, Studio Dome brings you the best deal on the net. Anywhere. Just go to the Studio Dome banner, JimmyChurchRadio.com, promo code Jimmy. Go Beckley Teppy.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way. KGRARadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Welcome back to Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Peter Levenda is with us. We are truly connecting the dots on everything that is wrong with the world today. Nobody is better than Peter. Tomorrow night, Robert Sullivan IV is with us. It will be Hollywood cinema symbolism and a little Freemasons thrown in for good measure tomorrow night. Okay, Peter, now here we go. Peter, you are who I want to be. And let me just tell you why. You discuss and research all of my favorite subjects. I wish I had enough time in my life to do what you have done in yours, but you are fascinated by the same things that I am. And we don't have the time tonight to connect the Grand Mufti and Saddam all the way back to Kennedy, but if we wanted to, we could. And we're not going to do that, but bringing Fulcanelli and Alchemy into the mix now is also another fascinating angle on all of this when we talk about the New World Order and secret societies and the Illuminati. Nobody has held tighter secrets than the alchemist, and that was that is your next book too as well. But how does Fulcanelli and Alchemy play into who is running the world?
Well, if you discuss alchemy from the Western perspective, Western alchemical texts and the history of the alchemists, you'll find that they were always the successful ones, or the ones who were believed to be successful, were always working for the governments in Europe. So they were working for, the kings and the emperors in Prague or in England or in France or in Belgium. They were always working for government sources. So there was always this connection between the alchemist and the government anyway. The idea was that if the alchemist could make gold, of course, an alchemist making gold would topple the economies of Europe. If they could just sit there and churn out gold all day and night. That was one issue. The other issue, of course, was the elixir of life. If you could find a way to heal sickness and grant immortality, that also had a lot of government applications. The governments would really want to have control over that technology. So there was that aspect. The other aspect is the language that the alchemical books are written in. They're written in code. And codes have always been, a major source of fascination for governments. If we could communicate in code, but without seeming to communicate in code, how great is that, right? We could communicate with our people, our embassies in various places around the world, etc. So you have the coded language aspect of alchemy is very attractive to governments. Plus what the alchemists say they can do, which is to manipulate matter. And that is, that has an enormous attraction for governments. So as we move along into the 20th century, you had this very mysterious character called Fulcanelli. No one knows what his real name is. In fact, there's controversy as to whether he even existed or not. I happen to believe he did. I think that his books are books by a real person. And it was not the people they think wrote the books. So there was a high adept of some kind under the name of Fulcanelli, who was basically trying to expose what alchemy really was to the world, and then became a wanted man by American intelligence and British intelligence at the end of the war.
And everybody loves a good secret. It doesn't matter right. if you're running a country, or if you are in pursuit of this, or the Philosopher's Zone, or transformation of metals and precious metals. Everybody likes a good secret, and the alchemist managed to keep the lid on everything. Nobody knew. Nobody could read their books. Nobody could read their formulas. Nobody could figure out who they were or where they met, but yet all of it was real, and certainly to the leaders of countries and kings and queens, and they paid handsomely for this. And like I said, everybody liked a good secret, right?
Sure. And the alchemists, as you say, were doing something real, and their secret was so well preserved that even today we can have shelves full of their books and not understand a damn thing that's in them.
And this is what is great, and we're going to get back to Fulcanelli, but you went back and translated. So how did you get that done?
This was a labor of love that has gone on for decades. It started in 1968, believe it or not. I read a book that had a foreword by the famous beat author Kenneth Rexroth. Rexroth is a famous polymath kind of guy. He wrote about Asian philosophy. He wrote poetry. He was called the father of the beats. So the sort of beatnik era, 1950s, San Francisco, that kind of thing. He wrote an introduction to a book on alchemy, and it blew my mind. I was 18 years old. I read this book, and his introduction really ignited something in me. Basically, he said, we know what they were writing about, but we can't tell you what it is, because if we told you, it would kill you. And that was enough for me to get interested,
Right,
really?
Right.
It's going to kill me? I got to know what this is. So for the next, since 1968 until now, not, every day, but pretty much consistently, year by year, I kept gradually adding to my store of information on this particular subject, following his lead. He said the secret is in India and China. And if you could understand what they were writing about when they wrote about alchemy, you'll understand what the Western alchemists were saying. And he didn't go into too much detail. He just was enough to get me interested. And I went and I studied Mandarin. I went to study Chinese for the specific reason I wanted to read the Chinese alchemical manuscripts because they had not been translated. So that changed my life. It set me on a path where I did business in China. I went back, I was there in the 80s when very few Americans were there. I went to the temples that still existed. I saw a lot of stuff. I talked to a lot of people, and I started to try to figure out what alchemy was all about. And it's not just about chemistry. It's not only psychobiology. There's a lot of that in there. There's Tantra. My book is called The Tantric Alchemist because what we know as Tantra is heavily involved with alchemy, but it's not the Tantra we may think we know. So I read the books in the Indian Tantric texts about alchemy. I read the Chinese ones, and I began to realize they're all using the same language. They're all using the same language. They're all talking about Mercury. They're all talking about silver and the moon and the this and the that, the eagle and the dragon. They're using the same imagery, whether it's in China or India or Europe, to discuss the processes. And that sort of lit, a light bulb over my head. Because in India, we know they were talking about biological processes. And in China, they were talking about chemical, mineral, and biological processes, and so on and so forth. And it became clear I could take this information and I could decode the most accessible alchemist who wrote in English, which was Thomas Vaughan, an alchemist who lived in the 18th century. And I was able to read his work, and suddenly the beams fell from my eyes, as they say, and the book, The Tantric Alchemist, is a book-by-book sort of decoding of what Thomas Vaughan was writing.
What did you find out?
I found out that what alchemy is merits the attention of those intelligence agents who were looking for Fulcanelli.
Did you start making gold?
No. What alchemy is, if I can boil it down, alchemy is going back to the Big Bang. It's going back to the moment of creation and then following it back in our direction, going all the way to the beginning and then coming back. Alchemy is about chemistry, it's about physics, astronomy, biology, psychology, all of these things, because all of these things proceeded from that one burst, that one moment of creation. There was a moment when I was researching this book when I had this sort of satori, this kind of vision, where I saw everything around me in motion from the Big Bang, where the books on my desk itself, the computer, everything around me, the house, the windows, everything was actually still moving, still in process. The process of creation was still taking place. Everything that I see and touch and feel is an artifact of the Big Bang. And that's the alchemical vision. Once you know that, once you see that, then you can begin to go back and understand what alchemy is and to cause changes to occur. You know, you have to first have that initial burst of insight. You have to realize we are still in the process of creation. We think that we're on this planet Earth, it's all done, creation is over. You know, the Bible says it was 6 days, God rested on the seventh, you know, it's over, nothing to see here, move along. But that's not exactly true. Creation is still in process. We are still moving at a tremendous rate of speed from that point in space that was the Big Bang. We're still moving very fast. And molecules are being created, atoms are being smashed, all these things are taking place all around us, and we are part of that. So alchemy is that. It's about that.
What about Cathedrals and who was Fulcanelli's pupil?
Yeah.
And there was, in the elixir of life and immortality and all of this came into play. And Eugene had said that he had visited him, I forget the place, but at some castle. And he had and then years later, all the way wasn't it like in the 50s? He ran into Fulcanelli again. And at that point, Fulcanelli should have been an old man or dead. But he looked the same as he did when he was his pupil back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, I think he ran into him at one point in Spain. It was at a building that had been what was it? It was a power plant of some kind, which was kind of ironic. And that's where he met him. And at that point, that's when the American intelligence guys were looking for him as well. According to the story, he was being sought by intelligence, something to do with, fission. With atomic fission or something. They believe that Fulcanelli may have had some formula or some knowledge of how fission worked. And, of course, that was what was contributing to building the atomic bomb. So then Cathedrals would then later saw him there and saw him again later, I think, in Paris, and saw him again, and he hadn't aged. And that was kind of impossible because now decades had passed and the guy looked the same age. That's if we believe Cathedrals. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. There was no particular reason for Cathedrals to make up these stories at that point. He was just reminiscing about his friend Fulcanelli and the fact that, my goodness, I saw him and he didn't look a day older than he was the last time I saw him. Yeah, I think it was an honest kind of a statement, and I kind of believe it.
Yeah, help me out here. I'm fascinated with Fulcanelli, but I'm not a true historian. But didn't he had some kind of meeting scheduled, a secret meeting of other alchemists in Paris, and that meeting was occurring, right? And he showed up for the meeting, and Fulcanelli happened to be there.
Right.
Isn't that how it went down?
That's how it went down exactly. Yep. And that was in Paris.
Yeah, and now he also said that he saw, wasn't he witness to Fulcanelli actually perform a successful transmutation of lead into gold, and he actually saw this go down in a laboratory.
Yes, he did. Cancellier is a very good source for this because he says that it actually did happen. I mean, one of the reasons he revered Fulcanelli so much is Fulcanelli proved it. I mean, he went and he did the transmutation. He's not the only, verifiable recorded case. There was the case of Van Helmont a couple of hundred years earlier where the same thing happened. And Van Helmont was a respected scientist at the time. Here was a guy who was one of the fathers of modern physics. And Van Helmont says, this stranger showed up at his house one day and gave him something wrapped in a wax pill. And he said, mix this with this and heat it to this temperature, and you'll see that, it's the Philosopher's Stone, and you'll make, more than its weight in gold. And Van Helmont did this, actually performed a transmutation into gold, and then had it assayed, and it was the purest gold anybody had ever seen. And Van Helmont, is on the record as saying, yes, this is possible, yes, this happened. And in fact, that particular story is the very first article I ever wrote in my life, and it was for my high school magazine, which was on Alchemy. It was the very first article I wrote, and it was on Van Helmont and the transmutation that he recorded in his notebooks. So this seems to exist, this alchemical process seems to be real. And what we have to do is try to figure out, what's behind it. And I think that the first step is an understanding we are still in process. And we just get involved in the process consciously and then start manipulating matter.
And what did you think? I assume that you read all of Mystery of the Cathedrals.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Of which, and I'm just going to tell the audience, and we're going to run out of time here, but allegedly, there's a lot of mystery behind this book, but there were only 300 copies of this book published, and it was the hottest book of its time. And I think this is going back to before 1930 for sure.
Yes.
And everybody wanted to get their hands on this book, and it was reputed to be authored by Fulcanelli himself, disclosing the alchemical mysteries of the cathedrals around France and Europe. Did you put that book under your arm and then travel to Europe, and did you follow through what was in Mystery of the Cathedrals?
To a certain extent in France, I did. I had spent a lot of time in France. Started with business because I was sent there for a number of times, and I spent a lot of time in Paris, mostly at Notre Dame, and at one or two other cathedrals. Whatever is still left is exactly the way Fulcanelli described it. It's a very, how shall I put it, a kind of a humbling experience to know that you're standing in a church that for most tourists is a very famous Catholic church, a very famous cathedral in the Gothic style and all the rest of it. And at the same time, you're standing in what is basically an alchemical laboratory.
Right.
And this is you're between two worlds. There's this weird sense that comes over you when you're in that, when you make that realization that you're standing in the middle of an alchemical laboratory, that the whole building is like a tuning fork. If you were to hit it somewhere, the whole thing would start to hum, and that's the feeling you get under those circumstances. It's astonishing.
And did you make it to the Great Cross of Hendaye?
No, I did not. I did not go to Hendaye.
Okay. Now, I know you've studied it. Have you been able to decipher what the heck that thing even says?
No, and I haven't really spent that much time on it, actually. I probably should have, but I haven't. I read about it. I have the books on it, not just the Fulcanelli stuff, but the other stuff that was written more recently.
Yes.
And it's intriguing. There's no question about it. But I haven't gone further, I think, than anybody else who's written about it so far.
Have you been contacted by any alchemist?
No, they tend to stay away from guys like me.
Yeah. Okay. Have you tried to? Okay. Have you identified? Have you located? Have you reached out to anybody in that society?
Basically, I just came out with this book, The Tantric Alchemist. It's just been published a short time ago. I'm going to sit back and wait and see what happens.
Because you know that they know that you know that they know. You know this.
Right.
No, and I'm being serious. I'm not being cavalier at all. I mean, it is it's a treacherous, dark, mysterious secret of secrets. And that's it.
Well, and it's language, you know. It's the beauty of using language to communicate something without communicating it if you don't already know what you're talking about. It's hard to describe, but I've had these conversations, though. I've had conversations very similar to an alchemical conversation of talking to people who are deeply involved in this subject and starting to talk. And if anybody had been listening, they wouldn't have known what we were talking about. They would have assumed we were talking about drugs, probably.
Right.
Instead, we're talking about, alchemical processes using the jargon, and it's a strangely illuminating and liberating feeling to have conversations like that. It's about language. Alchemy is all about the language. It's about how we use language to communicate and to hold back at the same time, just to see if the other person really knows what we're talking about, and then to talk a little bit more. And you can be talking about art, you can be talking about music, you can be talking about chemistry, or you can be talking about sex. You can be talking about any of this and be talking about alchemy. It's marvelous.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Peter, I got to thank you, first off, for coming back on with us tonight. Always a fascinating time with you. But I want you to tease us all. Just give me a little taste. What are you working on now? And I know it's top secret. I know you can't really talk about it. I know you have commitment and everything else that's going on.
Yep.
But give us a little taste.
Yeah, I just want to apologize to the listeners. I'm not trying to be coy about this. I'm not trying to really tease. I have a contract and I cannot discuss it. But I can tell you this, those of you who have liked Sinister Forces and who thought that was, that opened your eyes to things and everything else, the project I'm working on now is probably another level or two past that. So it's going to be very deep, very comprehensive as well, the same connecting the dots, but in a completely different way.
How is that possible?
I'm going to focus probably more on consciousness with this one, but that's not as boring as it sounds. Believe me, what happens with this is going to be something else entirely. So I think you'll be pleased.
Thank you so much, Peter. Are you coming out to the West Coast anytime soon?
Not until I finish this project, so not for another month or so at least.
Okay, well, I'll see you when you come out, my brother.
Very good.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Peter Levenda, everybody. Absolutely one of the best. Peter, thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too. Thanks.
Peter Levenda. And now this is the show right now. This is the show that you need to go back and listen to 2 or 3 times. Take out a pen, take out your paper, write stuff down, make some notes, and go back and review. And shall I review just a little bit right now? This is what you need to do, and I'm going to help you out. The 9. You need to go back. 1953, the original seance. Let me help you out. Forbes, DuPont, Astor, Bell Helicopters, Young. That's what you need to do. You need to start there. Go and watch Peter's presentation in Amsterdam. It's called the Secret Space Program. Go and watch that. It's a very simple Google search. It's going to pop up right there. Watch that. Take your notes. Go and do what I did. Go back and start to look at all of this. In one of the cool things about the video in Amsterdam is Peter has all of the photographs and documents that go along with his presentation. So you're able to do that and always remember the pointy hats too as well when you go and watch this. But there's all of that with the 9, what happened forward of that with Oswald going through Kennedy, and then backwards going back to Maury Island. There's a connection that goes with J. Edgar Hoover back to a church in the Bronx. You have to go see all of this for yourself. And there's a couple of revelations that Mr. Levenda makes in that video. And it involves him as a young man, too, as well. Synchronicity? Yes, absolutely. Coincidence? Probably not. He was meant to do all of this. But this research connects the dots forward and backward, going back to 1947 and the original UFO cases in the United States, moving forward all the way through the 1960s. And it's the same cast of characters that move along through all of these seminal events in American history. It's absolutely fascinating. And he's done it all for you. The best part about it is you get to go back and research this for yourself. And I know that at every turning of stones and pieces of paper and books and research that Peter has done, I've asked him myself, is a holy crap moment. Because as you start to unfold all of this, you see the same names. It's absolutely fascinating and incredible. And so you have that string of events that went on from 1947 to 1965 and beyond here in the United States. And then you have everything that was going on over at the same time over in the Middle East. We painted that picture. The Grand Mufti, go and Google and start to read about that and Saddam Hussein and the Muslim Brotherhood, how that goes backwards and forwards, not only back to the Nazis and what was going on in Berlin, which turned around and went the other direction across the pond here to the United States, over in the other direction into the Middle East, and involves exactly what is messed up now and what we are dealing with today in Syria and in Iraq and the problems with Saudi Arabia and Iran. It's an insane connecting of the dots. Nobody does it better than Peter Levenda. So there's your homework. Go have some fun tonight. This has been Fade to Black. Tomorrow night, Robert Sullivan IV is going to be here. What a great show. That's what we do. This is late night talk radio at its finest. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our executive producer is Rita Kamarian. Oh, what happened? What happened? What happened to my audio? Oh, here we go. Man, now I'm going to run late. Here we go. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kamarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Paul, Mark D. Kovar, LJ3, Renee, Mark Dunbar, Jonas. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar, Fady by Dale. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Drew worked really hard today. Thank you, Drew. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. Syndication, KGRA The Planet, and TalkNetwork.com. Tomorrow night, Robert Sullivan IV. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2015 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. Cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Email is jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. I want everybody to be safe. Go Beckley Tepe.